I'd just like to welcome everybody to the May 20th, 2020 Wildlife Conservation Board meeting. I appreciate everybody taking the time and just being respectful of folks talking. So please remember to mute your phones and mute your mics if you are not speaking. That helps everybody to listen in. And the way I want to start out is I will do a roll call, and we'll establish the quorum, and the board members and the legislative advisory members and staff that are on the call, recognize them, and then I'll ask Chuck to open it up and then turn it back over to me, and I'll go through some meeting logistics to help us get through the day. And then hopefully we'll have a successful board meeting at the end. So with that, I will do the roll call now. So Chuck Bonham.
I'm here.
Matt Almay for the Department of Finance.
I'm here.
Eric Sklar.
I'm here.
Alina Bokde.
I'm here.
Fran Pavley.
Here.
Diane Colborn. I know she was having trouble. Diane, is your phone muted? Okay, we'll work with Diane. And Mary Kreisman.
I'm here.
And then from the legislative advisory staff, Megan D'Souza for Senator Borges.
Here.
Catherine Moore for Senator Stern. She's probably not on. She told me this morning that she's going to be probably a little late. So Katarina Robinson for Senator Skinner. Keith Chelino for Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia.
I'm here.
Jim Metropolis for Assemblymember Friedman. And either Michelle Sevilla or Samantha Amana for Assemblymember Lamone.
Here. Michelle.
Great. So, Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum for the voting members of the Wildlife Conservation Board.
Great. Thanks, John. Couple thoughts. We're scheduled to go from 10 to 1. We may not need that full time. John has covered a couple of the common etiquette guidelines we are all now embracing in this telework world. So if your kids start screaming, that's fine. If dogs start barking, we all get it. The internet may drop at any moment. One of us decides to say something. If that happens for me, we'll just roll with it, and I'll connect as soon as I can. I had to dig around for a collared shirt this morning and get it presentable. I like the video function, so I'll keep that on as much as I can. And I just wanted to impress upon everybody that the department and the Wildlife Conservation Board and Resources Agency realize the historic moment each of us is going through professionally and personally. I am really thrilled to see 126 participants. I've scrolled through both our kind of attendees and staff, and it's just kind of a moment of pleasure and joy to see so many people come to a convening like this. I hope each of you is doing well, that you are healthy and safe, and that maybe for a couple hours we can use this civic engagement between us to remember and remind ourselves what it's like to support restoration and continue to do business in California on the conservation front through the Wildlife Conservation Board. So I'm pretty excited to carve out a couple hours, see some great presentations, and vote yes on spending money for good things. John, I'm going to kick it back to you. And I've had the full range of experience on these public teleconference meetings, from Eric and I dealing with 500-600 people on pretty unruly topics, to the board's already had a StreamFlow enhancement project Skype meeting. And we're going to do a few things differently, and I think you're going to explain that for the public and the board right now to ease the experience since we're all doing this remotely. Back to you, John.
Great, thank you, Chuck. And I will provide an opportunity as soon as I'm going through after the meeting logistics here to allow the rest of the board members to provide any opening comments if they so choose. And I just got a text that Diane is on. She heard us, but we couldn't hear her. So Diane, can you hear us? Can we hear you? So I know staff's working on that, so we'll check back with you in a few minutes. So to begin with, the meeting is conducted via Skype and through telecommunications. So once again, please mute your phones and or your computer if you're on one. For those using the telephone system, you can access the presentation that's being presented today through the Wildlife Conservation Board website. And then once you're on the website, if you go to meetings, you'll click on that, and then over in the presentations, you'll see the May 20th, 2020 presentation. The format of the meeting for today, and to help us get through this successfully, we'll complete the first few agenda items that's on the agenda, then go into the consent agenda items and take questions and comments from the board members, if any, and then also take public comment, if any. And then we'll do a subsequent motion on the consent calendar. The way the motions will work today is I will read the motion into the record, and then we'll complete a roll call vote or either pass or deny the recommended action. Then after the consent calendar, we will move into presentations. And the way the presentations will work is I will introduce the project and then notice any letters of support and or opposition that we received, and then introduce staff who will present the project and provide an overview to the board members and the public. At the end of the presentation, I will ask for board member comments, questions, and then ask for public comments. And public comments are going to be taken in 3 different ways today. We had put out a speaker card in advance and encouraged folks to send in a speaker card in advance of the meeting if they wanted to speak. And we've received several of those, which is great. The other way is that you can chat. If you're on Skype, you can chat to our IT folks. They'll be monitoring that. And so just please state your name and say you want to speak on on the particular item. And then after the chat is done, then we'll move into just general public comments. And if you want to speak, you have to unmute and we'll call upon you. And also please remember, if you are speaking, please introduce yourself by saying your name and the affiliation that you're with. And then also during the presentations, if any board member has a question or a clarifying comment or something like that, please speak up during the presentation. I don't think you need to wait till the end. And then I would like to ask the board if they're comfortable with doing the motions for the presentation similarly to the way we conducted the StreamFlow meeting. And what we did there was, instead of the board acting on each individual item at the time, we held all the recommended motions till the end. And then we had one motion for all of the presentation projects. If you're okay with that, we'll have one motion for all the presented projects, and I will recommend the motion into the board record and then do a roll call vote after that. However, if any board member wishes to condition the approval of a project or would prefer to have a roll call vote for any particular item, we will move the motion at that time and complete a roll call vote, and then move on to the next project. So with that, just one last time, please mute your phones, keep yourself muted, and please remember to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
And John,
yes.
Let me weigh in there. Just for reference, for all of our public attendees, the information technology platform actually allows us to see which phone numbers aren't muted. So we don't want to get into, okay, so I need 510-409-3824 to mute because I can see you're not muted. So if everybody could take one quick moment, look at your actual phone, stare at it. If the mute button is not hit, please hit it. That will assist us greatly. We're going to keep saying this every 10 or 15 minutes for the next 2 hours. We appreciate your patience.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. So now I'd like to ask if there's any board members that would like to make any opening comments at this time. And then one last check. Diane, are you on? Can you hear us?
She said she's on and she can see us, but we can't hear her. So I'm going to have her maybe drop off and try to get back on to see if we can hear her.
Okay, we'll check back with her in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So moving on, we'll go into agenda item number 2. This item has been discussed over the last couple of board meetings. It's related to the discussion and the selection of a new board chairman and vice chairman. Whether or not we do that today, we don't know. But the board directed staff to go back and do some checking with other conservancies and, see how they adopt and select their chair and vice chair. Just as a little background and history, the Wildlife Conservation Board has always had a chairman. It is codified in the Fish and Game Code that the Wildlife Conservation Board will select a chair from its members, but there is no guidance in any of that. And so with that, the board asked us to look into that. And I'd like to ask Chuck if he could kind of kick this off and get us started on this. And then I will go through a couple of slides and maybe a process that we can put into place to select the chairman and a vice chairman. So Chuck?
Great. Thanks, John. And we're, as a board, probably into a third discussion on this topic. And I confess perhaps I'm the person that started us down this path. And I still am convinced that there's an important moment for our board. And that moment is connected to kind of understanding some history. So the Wildlife Conservation Board has been around a long time, I think 1947. It is enshrined, as almost all of us know, in statute within the Fish and Game Code. Historically, its members were limited to the president of the Fish and Game Commission, the director of the department, and the director of the Department of Finance as voting members in conjunction with legislative advisory members. And in most of our careers in the last several years, we've seen this board moving through understanding its history and incorporating that history as part of our future, but also taking steps to kind of modernize our approaches and position for the 21st century and beyond. We've done our first strategic plan, we've updated it, we've onboarded new funding programs based on current needs and strategies. We've moved towards some of those programs having competitiveness and ranking and scoring, and there has been a lot that's happened at the board, including increasing the number of board members and kind of the diversity of perspective for board members. So I saw something similar play out at our Fish and Game Commission, where several years ago, it too began to work with its constituents how it could improve its practices. And what we're doing at the Wildlife Conservation Board now, I think, is a totally correct kind of engagement, whether there's a better, different way to think through how we handle the chair position. I've been chair since I've been director, so almost 8 years. And I'll say one more framing thing, John, and then send it back to you. Personally, I think that I see great value and merit in having this conversation between the board members and with our public constituents right now. I think this idea of forcing the board to be deliberate, have a moment in time where it evaluates potentially changing chairs and allowing the chair position to increase opportunity for new voices at the board leadership level is totally the right thing to consider. And on the other hand, there are certain things I'm concerned about. I think the board should be very deliberate and thoughtful how it manages a transition period. I think evaluating how we handle that transition does need some reference to our history. The board is joined at the hip with the department. Board staff are within the department. The department provides the board all of its information technology, payroll, human relations, operations. And at this moment in the pandemic, I think it's really important to understand the value in that connectivity between the board and the department, which, when the director is chair, has allowed for kind of seamless relations between the board and the department. So I'm very open to this idea that the board would decide this is the moment to explore transition and a different approach around chair. But I'm also very mindful and recommend we do it in a way that appreciates we're in the middle of a very tumultuous period in global history, and there's great value in kind of the seamless connectivity between the department director, the chair position, the board, and the department. So John, let me send it back to you, and then I have additional thoughts and suggestions, but I'll wait till the board members, we start to unpack this a little bit and engage.
Great, thank you, Chuck. So if we can move on to the next slide. So the chair roles, we kind of gave it some consideration from a staff perspective, and the number one role of the chair would be to lead board meetings, make sure the meeting's conducted appropriately, make sure that we're on target, those kinds of things, and then consult with the executive director between meetings as much as needed on any particular issue, whether it's budgets, whether it's staffing, whether it's projects, those kinds of things. And then also probably one of the most important things is to be a spokesperson for the Wildlife Conservation Board, whether that be at conferences, workshops, project events, or other functions, both within the administration and with the legislative processes. So next slide.
Yes, we have over a dozen. I'll reiterate. It's one.
And we do have some feedback on, so if you could mute your phone.
Yeah, so specifically if you're 916-3119, please look at your phone and mute.
Great. So, after our research with other conservancies, other state conservancies here in California, there's a number of options that are available. Some have a chair and most have a chair and vice chair. Some have a 1 or 2 year terms for that office. All of them agendize their elections. And Some are codified how that chair and vice chair are selected. Others is like ours, it's just at the selection of the board members. So I would, I think change is good. Chuck mentioned several changes that the Wildlife Conservation Board has gone through over the last several years. I think it's been great for not only the board itself, but I think from a staff perspective, those changes are good. And I think the continuity of having, the chair be with the Department of Fish and Wildlife has been great. But I do recognize that change can be great. And so I would like to just hand it over now to the board members, and we can have a discussion how they would like to see this roll out. And then staff can answer any additional questions if you have any, and then we'll see where we go from there. So with that, I'll open it up to the board members.
John, this is Alina. I just wanted to the board members and to John, in thinking through this item that we have had on the agenda for a few meetings, and thank you, to Chuck for kind of initiating this conversation with the board. I agree there's so much great work and accomplishments at the WCB to stand on the shoulders of great projects, great work, and great conservation. But I am a proponent and believe that it is, I think there is value in looking at leadership change and transition, but that transition should be done thoughtfully, and there should be a bigger discussion of how to manage, any impact that is basically unintended, right, through any kind of transition or leadership change within the board. And so I think given kind of the unique relationship of the WCB being housed within the department, it is important to talk about and plan for any potential leadership change. And so I really appreciate, Chuck, your comments on the importance of kind of keeping that as one of the guiding posts or principles as if we do look at a change in chair or incorporating a vice chair into the board. So with that said, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the work of the Wildlife Conservation Board and my colleagues and the work we've done collectively with the staff and the community on updating the strategic plan. And I think for me personally, I joined the board not only because I am a big proponent and believer in conservation. I've dedicated my professional career to park and open space protection, but with that, the context of always advancing the core work around equity, around equitable access, around equitable distribution of funding, and increasing partnerships, kind of how we've talked about in the past, increasing, expanding our tent and really looking at, again, I think the increasing transparency. So I really commend the work that we've done in the strategic plan and the incredible work that the WCB has done since its inception. And really, I just want to let the board know that I am interested, if again it makes sense for the board, I'm interested in being considered for a leadership position within the board to help really move forward, I think, the board's work, both collectively, our board and the agency, in advancing, I think, some of the guiding principles of the strategic plan to move the important work of the Wildlife Conservation Board forward. And, I think John's leadership, and I appreciate your comments, John, on the important history and context of the Wildlife Conservation Board and its goals and focus, but also the change that and the work that the staff and the board has done, both in expansion of the board, but also with the strategic plan that I feel like you've been very supportive of, and so you are to be commended for that. So with that said, I agree that if there is to be any leadership change, which I think just for a matter of course I believe in, but if the board agrees, I do think it does need to be measured and thoughtful, to just ensure that again there aren't any kind of unintended impacts with the fact that this is kind of a new structure or new approach for the board. So with that, I'll wrap up my comments, but did want to let the board know that, again, I think kind of the values that bring me to the board is what is also sharing my time to help with any potential leadership role within the board. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Alina. So other board members?
Yeah, John, this is Eric Clara speaking. I love this discussion. Thank you, Alina, for your great discussion of it. From my experience on the Fish and Game Commission, one nice thing to do is to think of the chair and vice chair as a mentoring and mentoree position, where the chair is somebody who's been on the commission for a bit, as Alina has, and then have this next person who's chosen for vice chair to be the person who's expected to be elevated to chair in whatever time that you want to do it, whether you want to say it's a 1-year term or a 2-year term, whether you just the board decides it wants to keep somebody for quite a while and eventually replace them with a vice chair. Whatever approach is chosen, I really recommend thinking of it that way, as the vice chair as a trainee position. Our experience at the Fish and Game Commission is we re-elect somebody every year as we're required to by code. It might be in this situation where the meetings are more infrequent, that maybe the term is a 2-year term. Of course, if somebody for some reason steps off, then you would have an election sooner. But we elect chairs every year in the first meeting of the year, and the chair and the vice chair. It works quite well.
Great, thank you. And I see Diane is on. I just want to circle back with Diane. And you're in the participant. There, she's off mute now. There she is. Are you there, Diane?
Hey, John, I'll weigh in while we...
Okay.
Right, so again, just as a reminder, I can see some of the attendees. You may not be on mute. 415309 is one of those suspects. Hey, so...
Yeah, that's Mary. I'm just trying to be ready to speak when it's time. But
okay, perfect. Well, now I know your number, Mary. Hey, here's what I'd say. I think Elena would be awesome at it. And I do think the board of the Wildlife Conservation Board should make this pivot. And what is an additional thing I'd suggest is I would be fine continuing to play a role, and I'm very open to the idea of chair, vice chair. I do think that this public health crisis and how our state leads through this will mean we have a very delicate, unique experience ahead of us collectively in the conservation space. And And I could see a way where we might consider the next year or two, depending on the term, we all decide, and given director's been chair for a long time, I'm fine continuing as chair for purposes of a transition where the vice chair position steps into the chair after a year. I do think we have some important dynamics ahead where the department, the board, and new board leadership are going to have to be mindful around salaries and employee relations and some hard decisions, kind of given the historic moment we're at right now. So that's my only thought on sensitivity to the most prudent way to handle this transition, which I think it's time to make the transition. And with that, Mary, I'll flip it to you.
Thank you. And Chuck, can I just say you have been such a thoughtful, diplomatic, humorous, wonderful chair. I think you do kind of embody what we hope a lot of our leaders have in these roles in terms of our ability to kind of bring in the public, both educate on issues, bring in your knowledge from the department, and move us forward and continually help the board evolve. So thank you for that. And I think I think change is really good, but I think thoughtful change is really important. And so I just appreciate both what Alina and you have articulated in terms of a way forward to make sure the institutional knowledge, the connection with the department is all stewarded really thoughtfully as we do continue to change as a board and evolve for the moment and the need that our state has. And so I would be really excited to support what sounds like a proposal for Alina to become our vice chair for the next year or so, and get prepared to kind of take over that role as she works more closely with Chuck and John to kind of understand and help think about what this transition can be most powerfully. I think that is really exciting for the board and a way to both continue kind of the evolution of this board into public membership, and also make sure that we are really building on the really strong foundation that's here and leadership that's here. So I just want to say I'm excited about that. I think that is a really important opportunity and moment for us, and yeah, excited to support that. In terms of, I know, and I don't know if, Eric made a good point on whether it should be 1 year or 2 years. It was good to hear the feedback that every year is kind of a good process on the commission. I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I sometimes feel like it's nice to give somebody a couple of years to dig in and do work with the staff, with the board. Usually kind of that second year is a year where, they've kind of learned and are able to really kind of take their leadership and board role to the next level. But I'm open. I think either way, the 2-year term or 1-year term could be good. I see benefits both sides, so I don't have a strong opinion either way right in this moment.
Great, thank you, Mary. So, Fran, do you have any comments, or Diane? And we're still working on Diane to get her. I see her. She's on. She's been unmuted a couple times, but her
Hi,
audio
can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are, Diane.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why we couldn't get. I could hear you fine, and it was showing I had unmuted myself on the Zoom. I mean on the Skype, but you couldn't hear me, so I don't know why. So I just got off that and called in. For sake of brevity, I support the idea of transitioning by having a vice chair who would work under the training of the chair for the next year. That sounds like a good way to transition the change, especially I appreciate what Chuck was saying about, this kind of chaotic time that we're in with everything else going on in the world. I've only got one more year on the board, so my term, so I know it's not me, but I support the change and doing it thoughtfully. But I'm assuming that's something we would need to agendize for for a future meeting, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm also the department. If we did make this change, the department would continue to. The director will always be a member of the board, right? I mean, that's a given. So it's not like we won't have the department involved. Obviously, as a chair, the person is going to have a lot more interaction with the board staff than they have just as a board member. And I understand the department staff is kind of in a unique position to be able to do that. You're just, kind of there all together on, but so whoever that is, Elena or whoever, is going to need to realize that being chair there'd probably be a lot more time involved in terms of regular interaction with the board staff than just be somebody who's prepared to, in a position where they can do that. That's all I have to say at the moment. You can mute me again if you want.
Thanks, Diane. You mute yourself, and then if we mute you, you'll have to hit *6.
Okay, I'm not sure how to mute. I'm not sure how I mute myself when I'm on the phone.
Okay.
How do I?
You should have the ability. There should be a mute and unmute button on your cell phone, and just hit the button, and you'll see a / go through your microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see that.
John, I think when they are on the phone, *6 works either way. So if you want to mute yourself, use *6. If you want to unmute yourself, just *6.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Celeste.
Hey, so this is Chuck. Yes, Diane, the director of the department, whomever that is, stays as board member. That's in statute. And John, to confirm, can the board today conclude how it wants to approach this and make a motion and approve a chair and vice chair? Or is your conclusion this discussion might nominate a chair, vice chair for a specific term, but then that needs to be agendized for a vote at our next meeting?
The way we agendized it today, you can either, act on it today, or we can agendize it for a future one. The way it is identified in the agenda is discussion and selection of new board chairman and vice chair. So with that, we can act on it.
Okay, Matt, Almy, or Senator Pavley, anything y'all want to add here? At some point, if we do want to act, I think someone, and maybe Mary did this, would need to make a suggestion, chair, vice chair, term. I suppose we should make that as a motion, have a second, and then vote. But Senator or Matt, y'all want to weigh in?
This is Matt. I have no comments.
If Senator Pavley's not going to comment, this is Eric Sklar. I would suggest we do two motions. One is establishing kind of what the procedure and rules are for choosing a chair and vice chair, and then a second motion electing a chair and vice chair for this year.
Eric, do you want to have a crack at?
Sure. Let me do the first. I'll do the first motion, which is that at the first meeting every year of the board elect a chair and vice chair for a term of 1 year. Secondly, second part of the motion is that in the reality that we're in the middle of a year, that at this meeting we elect the chair and vice chair for the remainder of this year.
This is Alina. I second the board motion.
So John, you take us through a roll call?
Great, I will. So Chuck Bonham,
Yes.
Alina Bokde,
Yes.
Diane Colborn,
Yes.
Mary Kreisman, you're off mute, but we can't hear you, Mary.
Yes.
Oh, there you are. And there is some delay. It seems like I've been on these where it's a significant delay, so that might be part of the issue today. So, okay, moving on. Fran Pavley. Okay. So, Fran, if you can hit *6, maybe try that. Okay, she came off mute. She's coming, I think. See, she's off mute. Okay, we'll come back to you, Fran. Eric Sklar?
Yes.
And Matt Alamy.
Fran.
All right, hi, Fran. So,
Yeah, Fran Pavley, yes. And
great.
if I could make a comment, I tried pressing *6 several times in the last 20 minutes.
Sure. Let me just do Matt's vote, and then I'll come back to you for a comment, Fran, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, Matt
Perfect.
Alamy?
Yes.
Great, so the motion passes. Thank you, board members. So, Fran, do you want to make some comments?
Just briefly, and I support the smooth transition concept and lean towards a 2-year thing eventually. But start with Chuck as the chair and then the vice chair, Alina. I have no problem with that. But just maybe in the future, having sort of a criteria. I'm very interested in, people who have a statewide perspective on all this. I serve on about 5 different boards and things, and that's really important, whether you're on the Coastal Commission or whatever you are. You care about all parts of the state equally, and this is a unique board because it's so much about not only access to open spaces, but acquisition and where it goes, and protection of biodiversity, and the list goes on and on. So, but my question was, John, I didn't know for board members if there's any legal responsibility or perception of a conflict of interest for any one of us who may have serve on other boards, or whether we're have a professional association with people who have an interest in outcomes on the board. I'm just raising that for someone to look at that. I don't see a problem. I think it's a well-balanced board, but just looking at long-term.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely look into that. And I don't know, I know Colin Mills, our staff attorney's on right now. If Colin wants to say anything at this point, I'd welcome that. If not, we can look into it and report back at the next meeting, if that's okay.
That's fine. That's fine
Yeah.
with me. We've always had a statewide agency person, so it was sort of took care of it. And this is going a different direction, which I support. I'm just sort of highlighting things to consider. And I do support eventually that 2-year term, just because we meet relatively infrequently, and I'm really excited about having a spokesman that sort of represents different geographic areas of the state, so that Wildlife Conservation Board can become more accessible and visible to all of California.
This is Eric Clara, if I can, John. I would just say on the conflict of interest thing, I don't think being a chair changes in any way the standard conflict of interest. I believe we have a conflict of interest policy, and every board member needs to comply with it. And so I don't think that this calls out anything additional to that. And also, I think I heard in Fran's discussion a motion to elect Chuck as the chair and Alina as the vice chair for the until replaced or reappointed at a subsequent meeting next year. So I would second that.
Okay.
Hey, John, this is Colin.
Yeah, Colin.
I agree with what Eric said from the perspective of a conflict of interest. It's just the general application of conflict of interest laws as a member of the board would apply. Relative to the chair position, I don't see any distinction being a chair in how the conflict of interest rules apply. So I think, moving forward, I think it's just something that we'll look at on a case-by-case basis, but I believe the position of chair doesn't change the general application of how we look at conflict of interest.
Great. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah.
All right. So did I hear, Eric, there was a motion and a second?
I would be glad to support Eric's inference that was a motion because that was my intent. So I'll move that we proceed, and someone can help me with the wording for a year, and then we can switch into a 2-year thing, but with Chuck Bonham serving as chair and Alina as the vice chair.
Great. Okay. I will do another roll call vote. So Chuck Bonham.
Yes.
Alina Boakday.
Yes.
Diane Colborn. I'll come back to Diane. Barry Kriesman.
Oh, I didn't hear you say my name, but I say yes.
Okay. Barry Kriesman.
Yes.
Fran Pavley.
Yes.
Eric Sklar.
Yes.
And Matt Alme.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So the motion passes. Well, that concludes item number 2. I'd just like to reiterate to make sure you mute your phones. And then if you do have to press *6 and nothing happens, don't worry because you're unmuted. So if you push *6 again, that will mute you back. So if you think it's not working and you press it again, you're actually muted again. So for those wanting to speak, other board members or the public, just press *6 once, and then that should unmute you. And then when you're done, you can press *6 again. Okay.
John, this is Alina. I just want to take a moment to thank you and Chuck and the rest of the board for your vote of confidence. I think this was a really important discussion. Appreciate all the comments and the feedback. So just thank you to the board.
Thank you, Alina. And I'm looking forward to having you as vice chair next year. To working with Chuck and I. Okay, any more discussion around item number 2? All right, moving on to item number 3. This is an item in our agenda that allows for public comment for items not in the agenda. So if anybody wants to speak, we did receive one speaker card that I'd like to call on right now, and it's from Tom Pollock. He's as listed as a Department of Fish and Wildlife retired staff. So Tom, are you on? I would like to address the board.
So Tom is unable to get on his computer.
Okay, who is this? Oh, is this Sunash? I did. So Sue, would you like to make any comments? Okay, is Tom still having trouble?
Yes. Tom's here.
Yes, John, can you hear me now?
We can, yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Tom Pollock, and I'm a retired California Department of Fish and Wildlife Associate Wildlife Biologist. I'd like to inform the Wildlife Conservation Board members of 3 past projects funded by the WCB at the San Jacinto Wildlife Area in Riverside County that are failing and continue to be problematic. And I'm trying to condense this a lot. So problem number 1 is in 1987, the Department of Fish and Game entered into a contract with Eastern Municipal Water District to deliver reclaimed water to agricultural users in the newly developing San Jacinto Wildlife Area. The WCB provided $1.1 million to fund 1/3 of the pipeline construction. The initial 25-year contract term expired in June of 2014. Eastern Municipal Water District then sought to curtail the 4,500 acre-foot annual allocation of water and to revoke the state's 20 acre-foot per day capacity right in the pipeline. After public protests, the Water District agreed to extend the water contract for 1 year pending the development of a wildlife area management plan. Each year since, the reclaimed water contract has been subject to an annual extensions for the last 6 years, with the Department of Fish and Wildlife apparently consenting to the contract diminution, hoping public protests would disappear. Problem number 2. In November 2003, the Wildlife Conservation Board approved a $25 million acquisition of the 9,117 acre Potrero Canyon property for inclusion in the San Jacinto Wildlife Area. The property was owned by Lockheed Martin Corporation and was and still is undergoing a consent order remediation for perchlorate groundwater contamination as a result of rocket testing activities. Since the Wildlife Conservation Board acquisition 17 years ago, the 9,107 acre Potrero unit has been locked up, allowing no public access or public use for no credible, justifiable reason. The denial of public access and public use is contrary to law, as well as the Wildlife Conservation Board's mission, vision, and value statements. Problem number 3. In May 2007, the Wildlife Conservation Board approved $221,000 for the development of the San Jacinto Wildlife Area Management Plan. In August 2010, the Wildlife Conservation approved an additional $260,000 for the development of the Wildlife Area Management Plan. In November 2016, the Wildlife Conservation Board augmented the management plan funding once again with $323,000, bringing the total funding for the San Jacinto Wildlife Area Management Plan to $804,000 to date. In February of 2018, the draft environmental impact report for the San Jacinto Wildlife Area Management Plan was released for public review and comment. Now, in May 2020, the draft EIR is reported to be in Sacramento undergoing Department of Fish and Wildlife headquarters review. 13 years have passed thus far on yet to be completed management plan for the San Jacinto Wildlife Area. This can only be described as excessive and a disservice to the public. Recognizing the Wildlife Conservation Board's guiding principles for public accountability and transparency, I am requesting these 3 problems issues be put on the agenda for the Wildlife Conservation Board August 2020 public meeting. My hope is that putting the light of public scrutiny on these San Jacinto wildlife area problems will lead to resolutions that would best serve the public interest. And I thank you for your courtesy.
Hey, John, if I could.
Please.
I would be okay if this is a report back item on the August 2020 agenda. And between now and then, as director, I would reach out to our regional manager and ensure there's a adequate report back on each of the 3 items.
Okay, we'll plan to add that to the August board meeting agenda. Check.
Thank you very much. And I do want to say I'm very familiar with the Wildlife Conservation Board, and I think that the San Jacinto Wildlife Area in large measure would not exist today if it wasn't for the efforts over many, many years of the Wildlife Conservation Board. So I recognize that, and I'm very appreciative of it. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pollack. Okay, I don't have any more speaker cards, nor do I know of anyone else who would like to speak during this particular time. Celeste, have we had any other chat?
Not for this item.
Okay, is there any member or any public member that is on their telephone that would like to speak on during this particular agenda item? Okay, hearing none, we'll move into item number 4. This is to just provide an overview of the current funding condition of the Wildlife Conservation Board. We highlight all of our funding that's available to us. At this particular time, we list all of the fund sources that are available, which includes the Wildlife Restoration Fund, the Habitat Conservation Fund, several bond acts that we're working through and under right now. We do have a general fund appropriation in our current funding, greenhouse gas reduction funds, and the table that's in the agenda lists those amounts that are associated with projects that are being considered this board meeting. Then it also deducts from the amounts, the total amount of projects under development. And then you have a projected unallocated balance. And then it also recaps those towards the end. So right now, total of all funds, the Wildlife Conservation Board is currently working with $363,172,210. And with the projects that are on today's agenda, as well as those projects that are under project development, we have a projected unallocated balance of $194,102,000. I would like to point out, I'm sure that most, if not all of you, are currently following the budget process. As you witnessed, the governor put out one of the best proposed budgets in California history back in January. Given the situation that occurred with the pandemic, subsequently following that, he came back with a May revise that significantly made changes to the proposed January 10 budget. While WCB is in that budget, most of our appropriations in the May revise are reappropriations of existing bond funds. And then there's also a proposal in there to support the Department of Fish and Wildlife through the Habitat Conservation Fund for a biodiversity protection fund. And so with that, I would ask Matt, Alme, or Chuck if they would like to say anything, or I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
This is Matt Almy. I'm happy to kind of elaborate a little bit more on the Habitat Conservation Fund issue. As John had alluded to, the pandemic and resulting recession has really changed the fiscal landscape dramatically. Unemployment claims have surged with a projected unemployment rate in 2020 of 18%. These job losses and business closures are reducing state revenue significantly, and it's leading to a projected budget deficit of approximately $54 billion. So the administration had to make a lot of very difficult choices over the past several weeks, but also was cognizant of setting priorities. And even in light of these significant budget shortfall, did try to be thoughtful about maintaining funding for emergency response as well as protecting vulnerable populations. So programs that really didn't fit into those kind of categories were identified for potential savings. And so one of those areas was in the Department of Fish and Wildlife, where we have some general fund reductions associated not only with pulling back some of the program expansions that we had proposed in January, but also reducing some baseline expenditures. And to offset really the programmatic impact of those baseline reductions, what we're proposing is to partially offset reductions to the department by shifting $19 million from the Habitat Conservation Fund to a new Biodiversity Protection Fund to support the Department of Fish and Wildlife's core biodiversity conservation and enforcement program. So that's really kind of an overview of what the proposal is. It is currently being considered by the legislature at this point.
Yeah, and John, I would say two things from where Matt left it. And I'm mindful of the board's need today to get through a pretty long agenda. So I suggest we kind of head into consent. But yes, for those interested, tomorrow from I think 10 until 1 p.m., the Assembly Budget Subcommittee 3 will be looking across all of the May revision items, including those related to the department. On its website, on the Assembly webpage, are instructions for the public on how it may wish to engage tomorrow. And then, Matt, correct me if I've got it wrong, I think the plan is on Sunday for a similar block of time. The Senate Budget Committee for our items, Sub 2, will engage on May revision items, and itself has published the ways for the public to engage in that Sunday kind of telephonic committee meeting. The last thing I'll say, so it turns out right now this year, this moment, Eric Scalar and I are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the California Fish and Game Commission. The roots trace back to the Board of Fish Commissioners. It's the first wildlife management entity created in these United States. And if you think about that timeline, so what has that 150 years included? It's included the Spanish influenza, 2 world wars, September 11th, the Vietnam War, this global pandemic. We're going to make it through this moment. But as Matt mentions, we're in a historic economic situation, and our department's going to need to do what it needs to do to help the administration. So we will be dealing with substantial but understandable adjustments to our budget. And we're appreciative that the WCB and the department are kind of navigating this together.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Matt. So is there any other board member comments or questions?
I had a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just a point of clarification when I try to explain this to people. And I know it's just part of the May revision process, and there'll be hearings with the legislature and the appropriate committees and negotiations with the administration. So is this, in more simple terms, sort of, I know CDFW struggles with not being more fee-based through no fault of their own. And so it was general fund money that supported the important work of enforcement officers in the field. And so the shift from HCF is backfilling that general fund expenditure of important enforcement officers out of what's called the Biodiversity Protection Fund. Is that an explanation in simple terms?
Matt or Chuck, do you want to take that?
I think I think it's a combination, and Chuck can fill in. Basically, that the department's general fund supports both enforcement as well as a lot of biodiversity conservation, and so the idea here is that we wanted to maintain at least the broad programmatic purpose of the Habitat Conservation Fund, and wanted to make sure that the funds that otherwise would be going for those purposes would help support kind of the department's operational costs associated with those very purposes. I don't know, Chuck, if you wanted to add.
Yeah, Senator, two things. The two biggest department programs or functions connected to
Vice President
general
of Environment,
fund.
Health and Safety, Dow, DuPont, Cargill, Monsanto, and
Hey,
Somebody needs to mute their phone.
Could everybody mute their phones? So I can see that 706-982-818-665 aren't muted. If y'all want to take a moment, look at your phone and hit the mute button. Our biodiversity programs and our law enforcement. So the transfer will help us manage this economic moment for those two programs, which, broadly speaking, aligns with some of the underlying objectives within the Habitat Conservation Fund, I think. So there's symmetry.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck. So any other board member comments? And we'll move on. Great, hearing none. So let's move into the consent
John,
item. Whoops. Go ahead, Mary.
It takes a moment for me to double get off my unmute, and then it kind of tells you you're unmuted. So I apologize for the delay. I was just going to say I appreciate this conversation, and I think we should, as we kind of go through this economic moment, I'd love to continue this over the next few board meetings, because I think this is really important for us to be thinking about how we continue to do this essential work of the state in this moment. And it makes me so grateful for Prop 68 and thinking about, the need for money like that to continue to sustain this really important work across the state. I mean, we know conservation is like a retirement account. If we don't make investments now, we don't get the benefits when we absolutely need them in the future. And I think we have to continue to kind of think about and talk as a board about what this means and how we support the continued kind of broad scale work that needs to happen. So I just wanted to say, let's keep this conversation going over the next few board meetings. I know that this is a tough situation where we have to, the state has to make some really tough decisions. And at the same time, I think we're all here because we believe that this is essential work. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mary. All right, one last time. Any other comments? Okay, moving on to consent items. This is to consider consent items that are in the agenda, items number 5 through 21. We do have several letters of support that I'd like to read into the record. So for item number 6, Tracy Ellison, the Conservation Program Manager for Solano Land Trust. Item number 8, Richard Anderson, Supervisor, 5th District, County of Nevada, Board of Supervisors. Lisa Wallace, Executive Director of the Truckee River Watershed Council. Dr. Dean McKay, President of the Tahoe Truckee Fly Fishers. Alexa Aller, Executive Director of the Mountain Area Preservation. Perry Norris, Executive Director of the Truckee Donner Land Trust. And Lynn Saunders, President and CEO of Truckee Chamber of Commerce. For item number 10, we have letters of support from Tom Martinez, Chief Deputy General Manager of the California Exposition and Fair, Matt McKim, Director of Animal Care at the Sacramento Zoo, and Laura Patterson from a private citizen. Item number 17, Mr. Dan Silver, Executive Director of the Endangered Habitats League. Also for item number 18, Dan Silver, Executive Director of the Endangered Habitats League. Same with item number 19, Dan Silver, and also on item number 20. Dan also sent a letter of support on item number 20. So with that, is there any board member comments or questions on any of the consent items? All right, hearing none, there has been a request for a public comment through the speaker card process. So on items number 8 and 13, or number 8, Lisa Wallace, Executive Director of the Truckee River Watershed Council, would like to speak on item 8. Are you there? Okay, so item 13, Katy Hornbeck, Acting General Manager at East Bay Regional Park District.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Katy Hornbeck, and it's actually Acting Grants Manager for the East Bay Regional Park District. I just had a quick comment on 13, 14, and 29. They all have to do with grants for Park District projects, and I just wanted to say thank you to the WCB and the project managers that I've been working with, Cara, Heather, Celeste. It's been a real pleasure to work with everybody, and the Park District is very excited about these projects and the funding being received from WCB. So just wanted to say thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'd just like to, yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
I see Lisa in the chat function does not have a comment on number 8.
Right. Good. And I would just like to ask, I know you guys have been quick, but looking at the clock, and for those giving public comment, I would like to ask that you hold your comments to no more than 2 minutes, if that's okay.
I also see Michelle Stevens has made a request for item 10. And reminder to the public, you may be on the brink of a motion to approve all of the consent.
Yes.
So,
may I speak?
Is this Michelle?
Or is it later?
Is this
yes.
Michelle? Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
Yes. I just wanted to thank you for your support at Bushy Lake. It's been a vision in the works with Sac State for 5 years. We're doing our virtual graduation today, is why I have my regalia on. But I think this is a vision that will be something beautiful for the future. We've been out there for 5 years, and I just can't, I wanted to express my gratitude. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, seeing no more public comments, I would entertain a motion at this time. Actually, if we're ready, I can read the motion.
Please.
John, this is Celeste. We do have a comment for number 15. I don't know if Bridget, the Executive Director of the Sierra Foothill Conservancy, wants to speak on that one.
Yes, I would love to. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good morning. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the board and the staff of the Wildlife Conservation Board for the consideration of this project, the Bean Meadow Enhancement for Climate Resiliency Project, item number 15. We have been working on this meadow restoration project with an extensive group of partners for a number of years, and the investment in this project is going to be critical to the next phases of success. So thank you all for this consideration. And then additionally, on behalf of the California Council of Land Trusts and the Sierra Cascade Land Trust Council, I'd just like to extend gratitude to the Wildlife Conservation Board for your leadership and which is ongoing even during this time of significant crisis. So thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you, Bridget. So with that, I will read the motion, and then we'll do a roll call vote. So staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board adopt the written findings and approve all the individual projects identified by staff as suitable for funding up to the amounts listed for each, and listed as consent calendar items 5 through 21 as identified in the Wildlife Conservation Board final meeting agenda dated May 20, 2020. Authorize staff to enter into the appropriate agreements necessary to accomplish these projects, and authorize staff and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to proceed substantially as planned. So do we have a...
John, I'll second. It's Chuck.
Great. Thank you. So roll call vote. Chuck Bonham?
Yes.
Alina Bokde?
Yes.
Diane Coburn? Mary Kreisman?
John, yes.
Fran Pavley?
Yes.
Eric Sklar?
Yes.
Matt Almay?
Yes.
And Diane, are you able to talk? Okay, well, I'll circle back with Diane for a vote on the consent calendar as we move through the next few items, if that's okay. If not, the motion does pass besides that. Okay, so looking at the screen now, we've provided a map that shows all of the projects for consideration today. There's a total of 31 projects. There's 7 fee title projects, fee acquisition, 1 conservation easement project, 12 restoration and enhancement projects, 7 planning and study projects, and 4 public access projects. The map, there's quite a bit of activity around the Bay Area. A few on the eastern side of the Sierras, and then down in Southern California. So as we go through the presentations today, staff will provide a better, more descriptive map for each project. So with that, we'll move into item number 22. Which is the Ash Creek Wildlife Area Expansion or Habitat, Wetland and Habitat Conservation Project. We have received no letters of support on this project, and Mr. James Croft on our staff will present you the project this morning. James?
Thank you, John, and good morning, everyone. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to California Waterfowl Association for a cooperative project with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to enhance wetland habitat on the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Ash Creek Wildlife Area. The wildlife area is located approximately 4 miles northeast of the town of Beaver and straddles both Lassen and Modoc counties. Next slide, please. The The Ash Creek Wildlife Area was purchased by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and designated a wildlife area in 1986. Historically, much of the area's acreage was composed of a mosaic of upland, wetland, riparian, and wet meadow or floodplain habitats. Prior to CDFW ownership, the area was farmed and grazed for well over a century. Under CDFW ownership and management, numerous partners have worked to restore and enhance the habitats found on the property in order to provide adequate resources for a host of wildlife species, as well as providing the public with recreational opportunities. Next slide, please. Increased availability and management of water resources resulting from this conservation project will elevate breeding, molting, nesting, and foraging opportunities for migratory bird species that utilize the region. Enhancement of the proposed managed wetland and wet meadow acreage will establish quality habitat corridors between acreages located on the wildlife area and other private seasonal wetland or wet meadow complexes throughout the region. Next slide, please. Project activities will include the installation of an all-new water delivery system that will develop new ditch infrastructure and pipeline systems needed to support wetland, wet meadow, and upland habitat on the wildlife area. These will increase water use efficiency during wetland flood-up and drawdown. Next slide, please. The project will also include many new water control infrastructure upgrades, helping to further increase deliverable water supplies needed to manage wetland, upland, and wet meadow habitat along the Big Valley Canal. Next slide, please. These upgrades will consist of replacing dilapidated water control structures such as screw gates, culverts, and risers along the Big Valley Canal. Many of these structures have been in the ground for 40+ years. They leak, are set at odd elevations, or have become badly eroded and no longer function efficiently. Next slide, please. The project will install a new 4,000 pipeline to replace a section of the Big Valley Canal that is leaking severely and inundating seasonal wetland habitat that is not meant to be flooded year-round. This section of canal is under constant stress as water is impounded against the canal's containment levees during high seasonal runoff events. The new pipeline will deliver water back into the delivery canal well downstream, avoiding a decades-old problematic canal section. Next slide, please. The project will implement measures to rehydrate a section of floodplain habitat on the wildlife area. Many incised channels have dewatered the historic floodplain downstream of several managed wetland units. Rock grade control structures will be placed within incised channels in order to back up water, rehydrate the channels, and spread released managed flows across the wet meadow surface. Small potholes will be excavated behind the rock grade control structures to provide depressional wetland habitat. Combined, these efforts will create a resource-rich complex of wetland, wet meadow, brood habitat, and nesting habitat for waterfowl and other wetland-dependent wildlife. Next slide, please. Lastly, the project will complete restoration of several wetland units to increase drainage capabilities. Continuous leakage of the Big Valley Canal water into these units has resulted in uncontrolled growth of rank emergent vegetation, creating management and maintenance issues. New water control structures and soil systems will allow area managers to completely drain these units in order to germinate moist soil plants and complete vegetation management activities. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed. On Skype today to answer any questions you may have is Mr. Greg Heidemann, Regional Biologist for California Waterfowl Association. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, James. So is there any board member comments or questions? Right, hearing none. We don't have any speaker cards on this particular item. Is there any member of the public wishing to speak? All right, hearing none. All right, so remember we'll have one motion at the end. So we'll move on to item number 23. This is to consider a grant for the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area Habitat Drainage and Improvement Project. James will also provide you the presentation today. We have no letters of support on this at this time. So James.
Thank you again, John. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to Ducks Unlimited Incorporated for a cooperative project with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta Conservancy to enhance wetland habitat on the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. The wildlife area is located 3 miles east of the city of Davis in Yolo County. Next slide, please. The 16,770-acre Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area was designated as a wildlife area by the Fish and Game Commission in 1994 and is managed by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Recreational opportunities at the wildlife area include wildlife viewing as well as waterfowl and upland game bird hunting. Through a partnership with the Yolo Basin Foundation, the wildlife area hosts guided field trips for school children. Next slide, please. The wildlife area is managed to provide riparian, upland, grassland, and wetland habitat for migratory birds and other wetland-associated species, while maintaining historic agricultural operations and providing flood control for the Sacramento River. The wildlife area is located within the Yolo Bypass, which conveys seasonal high flows from the Sacramento River to help control river stage and protect the cities of Sacramento, West Sacramento, Davis, and other communities, farms, and lands from flooding. Next slide, please. This road crossing, called the Y, located east of the South Davis Drain's El Macero pumping station, represents a major constraint to draining the western side of the wildlife area. This crossing serves as the main access road for all agricultural operations, wetland management, and public access north of the Puda Creek Channel. This project will remove the 2 parallel road crossings over the South Davis Drain at the Y and replace them with a single precast concrete bridge. The project will relocate an existing pump to the drainage channel directly north of the new bridge and construct culvert and channel improvements in 3 separate areas to improve flow between the northern channel and the extension of that channel extending south to the Y road crossings. The excavated material from channel improvements will be sidecast onto the adjacent dirt road that parallels the channel and compacted in place to form a wider road to improve maintenance access. These improvements will increase the ability to drain South Davis drain water into the tow drain by way of the cross canal. Next slide, please. The project will improve drainage along the South Davis Drain, which will in turn improve access through the wildlife area by alleviating flooding along the roadway east and south of Rice Corner. South Davis Drain capacity is constrained by the existing drainage culverts at the Rice Corner, which is blocked by beaver dams, excessive vegetation, sedimentation, and long-term pipe compression due to vehicle traffic. As a result, South Davis Drain flows back up behind these culverts, inundating surrounding lands and flooding access roads. The project will replace culverts and parallel road crossings with a single precast concrete bridge to improve South Davis Drain capacity and accelerate drainage of the surrounding lands and roads. Additional Rice Corner improvements include replacing and upgrading 3 24-inch culverts with 36-inch culverts and replacing a water control structure at the channel's southern end. Next slide, please. I apologize I wasn't able to get a better picture of the Parker Pond here for you guys, but the approximately 12-acre Parker Pond is located directly east of the Yolo Bypass western levee, just north of the point where the levee gradually turns from a southward direction to a westward direction to parallel the northern bank of Puda Creek. On this slide, it's indicated with light blue at the kind of bottom left-hand side of the conceptual map. Wildlife area managers intend to convert a 220-acre area of land located directly south of the Parker Pond to wetlands, but no mechanism is currently in place to move pond water onto these potential managed wetlands. The wetlands currently are only inundated when the Yolo Bypass floods and are therefore often dry. Project will excavate a segment of the southern edge of the pond to create a sump or low area within the pond that would accommodate a new water lift station and would expand the pond's water storage capacity and allow managers to inundate the 220-acre wetlands on demand. Overall, this project will restore 220 acres of managed seasonal wetland, improve water management to enhance 1,800 acres of existing managed seasonal wetlands, enhance 140 acres of semi-permanent wetland or brood ponds, and enhance 1,100 acres of wildlife-friendly agriculture. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed. On Skype today to answer any questions you may have is Mr. Aaron Will, Regional Biologist for Ducks Unlimited. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, James. So any board member comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. I don't know, has Diane been able to get back on? If you have, just speak up, Diane. Okay, any public comment? We have no speaker cards, nor has anybody asked to speak on this particular project through chat. Okay, hearing none, so we'll move on to item number 26. This is the Grasslands Water Efficiency Improvement Projects, Phase 2. James will also present this project. James.
Thank you, John. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to California Waterfowl Association for a cooperative project with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to enhance 2,668 acres of riparian, wetland, and upland habitat on the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's North Grasslands and Los Banos wildlife areas located in Merced County. This project is a continued collaborative effort to enhance wildlife habitat in the grassland ecological area on the CDFW, Los Banos, and North Grasslands wildlife areas. The project is a second phase to a grant that was funded by the Wildlife Conservation Board in 2017. These presentation slides are a departure from the first two presentations I've given, in that in this presentation I will be showing pictures of completed infrastructure enhancements from both Phase 1 and from other previously completed WCB projects on these wildlife areas. I hope that these slides provide insight into the work that this project will complete and what the after looks like on these infrastructure improvement projects. Next slide, please. The project will complete two components to improve the visitor experience on the Los Banos wildlife area. The first component will restore native upland grasses, trees, and shrubs surrounding the Venata Trail on the Los Banos wildlife area. These uplands are currently dominated by invasive plant species and provide little benefit to wildlife. The Venata Trail is used to educate students on wetland and upland ecosystems, and these enhancements will provide students with improved educational opportunities. The second component will include the installation of 13 new 3-person hunting blinds and 1 ADA accessible blind on the Gadwall unit of the North Grasslands wildlife area. These new blinds will increase hunter opportunity within the wildlife area. Next slide, please. At the Los Banos wildlife area, the project will use 4,000 yards of excavated material to refurbish levees. The levees are in poor shape, pose a threat to the stability of the adjacent wetland units, and create safety issues for visitors and staff. By refurbishing levee crowns and slopes, it will ensure safe passage for staff and visitors and increase the integrity of the wetland unit perimeter levees. Next slide, please. On the Salt Slough unit of the North Grasslands wildlife area, 40,000 cubic yards of material will be moved through the development of a swale system and refurbishment of levees. Swale development will allow for the expedited drainage and flood up of each wetland unit. Enhanced removal of water from wetland units will help to improve moist soil plant production to provide forage for migratory birds. Levee improvement will allow for safe travel across levee roads and protect the integrity of the wetland units. Secondly, Unit 33 of the Salt Slough unit will be regraded to reduce extreme elevations. Regrading will allow irrigations to use significantly less water and give the wildlife area staff the ability to grow desirable moist soil plant species across the entire unit. Next slide, please. Currently, at the Gadwall, water is backed up a main drain ditch to flood 130 acres on units 12, 13, and 14. The lift pump that once lifted water out of the drainage canal system and delivered water for flooding up these units will be replaced. Replacing this pump will improve flood up and irrigation capabilities of these units and eliminate drainage issues, which will help to improve habitat quality on these wetland units. Next slide, please. The project will construct and extend a gravity flow delivery ditch on the Gadwall unit at the North Grasslands Wildlife Area for an additional 1,000 feet. At the terminus of the new ditch extension, a new water control structure will be installed that will deliver water directly into a new pipeline system. The pipeline will extend 400 feet, allowing delivery of gravity flow water directly into Unit 1. Currently, wildlife area managers must fill the unit from the low side and push water up to the high side. This method is not ideal for flood up as it is inefficient and creates vegetation issues. After these enhancements, water will enter the unit from the highest elevation and flow down to the low end of the unit, creating much higher water use efficiency. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed. On Skype today to answer any questions you may have is Mr. Scott Capra, Regional Biologist for California Waterfowl Association. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So any board member comments or questions? Great, hearing none. There are no speaker cards for this particular project. Any members of the public wishing to speak or make any comments at this time? Great, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 25. So if we can advance the next slide. So this is a project up in Nevada County, the Frog Lake project.
John, you're on mute.
Great, thank you, Celeste. So the next project is item number 25. It's the Frog Lake project. It's considered a grant to the Truckee Donner Land Trust. Mr. Brian Gibson on our staff will present the project to the board this morning. Brian?
Thank you, John. This proposal is to consider the approval of a grant to Truckee Donner Land Trust for the acquisition of approximately 201 acres known as Frog Lake. Frog Lake is located near Donner Summit. Nearby development includes the Tahoe Donner community, cross-country and downhill ski areas, an equestrian center, golf course, and lodge. Red Mountain, which the Wildlife Conservation Board helped conserve in 2019, is adjacent to the property. And Carpenter Valley, which the Wildlife Conservation Board helped conserve in 2017, is north of the property. Beyond Carpenter Valley and on the north side of Carpenter Ridge lies Independence Lake, which the Wildlife Conservation Board helped conserve in 2009. New slide, please. The property is an essential component of the 2,914-acre campaign to protect Frog Lake, Red Mountain, and Carpenter Ridge, a landscape-level conservation effort being implemented by Truckee Donner Land Trust, the Trust for Public Land, and the Nature Conservancy working together as part of the Northern Sierra Partnership. The acquisition of Frog Lake, when combined with Red Mountain and Carpenter Ridge, will allow the partnership to build a new trail branching from the existing Warren Lake Trail to connect Frog Lake, Red Mountain, Lower Carpenter Valley, and Independence Lake. The acquisition of Frog Lake is the final piece of the puzzle to link the high country of Castle Peak to the wildlands surrounding Carpenter Valley and Independence Lake. Next slide, please. The property falls within California Department of Fish and Wildlife Sierra Valley Truckee Conceptual Area Protection Plan. The objectives within the Conceptual Area Protection Plan are to protect wetland, wet meadow, riparian, bitterbrush, and sagebrush habitats for the Loyalton Truckee deer herd, as well as for many other wildlife species. The property contains a variety of habitat types, including wetland, riverine, and fen habitat types, as well as high elevation mixed conifer forests, including red fir and Jeffrey pine. These habitat types are ideal for willow flycatcher, upland game birds, and waterfowl. The property also supports black bear, mountain lion, bobcat, coyote, and various bird species in the summer range of the Loyalton Truckee deer herd. Next slide, please. Several special status species may occur on the property, including wolverine and Pacific fisher. Next slide. Truckee Darn Land Trust plans to create a small network of mountain huts so visitors can enjoy the backcountry of the Northern Sierra in all seasons. The historic cabin and outbuilding at Frog Lake will serve as a hub for the hut network. Next slide. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed, allocate $1,300,000 for the grant to Truckee Darn Land Trust, authorize staff to enter into the appropriate agreements necessary to accomplish this project, and authorize staff and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to proceed substantially as planned.
Great, thank you, Brian. So any board member questions or comments? Great. So we do have one speaker card that was submitted for this project. Mr. Perry Norris, Executive Director of the Truckee River Land Trust.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. Thank you, John. And the Truckee Darn Land Trust would just like to say thank you to the Wildlife Conservation Board for considering it what is truly a unique project that will surely benefit generations of Californians to come. And I note that this is a unique project because it just isn't that often that a high alpine lake at 7,800 foot elevation comes up for sale and is able to be protected and put into the public trust. I'd also like to thank Brian for his hard work on working with us to make this happen, as well as our partners at the Nature Conservancy, the Trust for Public Land, and the Northern Sierra Partnership. So thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Great, thank you. Any other public comments at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 26 in the agenda. So if you could advance the slide, please, Celeste. Keep going. There we go. So item number 26 is to consider the grant to Eastern Sierra Land Trust for the Honeywell Ranch conservation easement. Brian will also present this to the board this morning. Brian.
Thank you. Honeywell Ranch is a 4,100 acre working cattle ranch located in Bridgeport Valley on the lower eastern slopes of the Sierra Nevada mountains, approximately 7 miles northeast of Yosemite National Park. The nearest communities are Bridgeport, which is 3 miles north, and Lee Vining, located about 20 miles south. The property is adjacent to the northern boundary of the 2,040 acre California Department of Fish and Wildlife owned Summer Meadows unit of the Green Creek Wildlife Area. WCB funding has supported numerous land acquisition projects in the area, including the 1,240 acre Cinnamon Meadows Conservation Easement held by the Eastern Sierra Land Trust, and the 6,390 acre Centennial Conservation Easement located immediately north of the property, which is held by the California Rangeland Trust. Next slide, please. The property is identified within California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Bodie Greater Sage Grouse Conceptual Area Protection Plan. The primary purpose of the Conceptual Area Protection Plan is to conserve and enhance quality essential habitat for the bi-state distinct population segment of the greater sage grouse. The irrigated meadows on the property meet the primary constituent elements of critical brood rearing habitat for the sage grouse. The importance of the property for the sage grouse has been documented by GPS collar data demonstrating considerable use of the meadows and the sagebrush on the property. The property has been in the Honeywell family for 4 generations and has been grazed for livestock by livestock since the 1860s. Napoleon Bonaparte Honeywell and Esther Honeywell homesteaded the ranch in 1861, where the family milled timber for the town of Bodie, grazed cattle, and built the ranch house in 1880 that's still in use today. To offset some of the expenses of running a ranching operation the size of Honeywell Ranch during the Great Depression, the family started taking in guests to help with ranching responsibilities in 1931. The tradition continues today with guests signing up to help with spring and fall seasonal cattle work and annual cattle drives, with the income from the guest ranch helping to support the ranching operation. Next slide, please. The property possesses rangeland, grazing land, included irrigated and unirrigated pasture, wet meadows, aspen stands, and high desert sagebrush habitat areas supporting mule deer, mountain lion, and of course the greater sage grouse. The property also contains portions of the East Walker River, its tributaries Buckeye Creek, Eagle Creek, Robinson Creek, Green Creek, and spring sources. Next slide, please. The property is located in the migration corridor for the East Walker and West Walker mule deer herds. The Bureau of Land Management has identified Honeywell Ranch as containing intensive, dispersed, and light use areas for mule deer. Portions of the property provide important buffer habitat for the Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep. The irrigated pasturelands and timberland provide important foraging habitat for raptor species, including bald eagle and northern goshawk. The riparian areas provide habitat and forage for neotropical migratory songbirds, amphibians, pollinators, and bats. Next slide, please. The purpose of the easement is to assure that the property will be retained forever in its predominantly natural state as an agriculture, scenic habitat, and open space resource, and to prevent any conversion or subdivision of the property that could significantly diminish or impair these values. Any activity that would disturb the soil surface or materially alter the topography, water or wetlands, including crop cultivation, most new building of new roads, and conversion of native vegetations are prohibited by the easement. Next slide. As the easement holder, the Eastern Sierras Land Trust responsibilities include, but are not limited to, annual monitoring, record keeping, and enforcement for the purpose of preserving the property's conservation values in perpetuity. Next slide. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed, allocate $1,255,000 for the grant to the Eastern Sierra Land Trust.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Right, any board member comments or questions for Brian, or me, or anyone?
John, I don't have one specific. I would just interject here and say these series of photos are pretty awesome across the various projects. I appreciate the virtual tour of California today.
Great, thank you, Chuck. Any other board member comments or questions? Okay, we do have one speaker card on this from Kay Ogden, the Executive Director of the Eastern Sierra Land Trust.
Thank you, John. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Chuck, Alina, and esteemed board members. Thank you for considering the final piece of funding to complete the acquisition of the 4,000 plus acre Honeywell Ranch conservation easement in Bridgeport Valley. I know that some of you know and love the Eastern Sierra, and perhaps some of you have not yet had the opportunity to visit. I'd love it if you could come on over and have a tour of some of the amazing projects that you have helped fund in this majestic region. You've heard from Brian about the conservation values that are a part of this ranch and are worthy of protecting in perpetuity. In addition, NRCS has identified the wet meadows and sagebrush steppe on the ranch as a nationally important grassland of special significance. The more than 4,000 acres span an ecological and elevational gradient that will help species adapt to changing climate and have room to roam. The Honeywell family are the true heroes of this project, and I want to thank them for hanging in there through almost 5 years of hard work to get this project before you today. Because of the Honeywell family's land ethic and 160 years of land stewardship, a piece of history can be preserved forever. So thank you, and thank you to your amazing and helpful staff. And as Bridget said earlier, on behalf of CCLT and the Sierra Cascade Land Trust Council, I hope that you know how deeply we value and appreciate your support of conservation throughout the Sierra and California. Thank you for considering the final funding for the Honeywell Ranch conservation easement, and please come visit the east side. We'd love to show you around.
Thank you, Kay. All right, any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 27, the American River Forest Restoration Project. This is to consider a grant to the American River Conservancy for a cooperative project with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Nature Conservancy, CAL FIRE, State Water Resources Control Board, and others to enhance forest health up in this Sierra. As Mr. Judah Grossman of our staff will present the project this morning. Judah?
Thank you, John, and board members. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to the American River Conservancy for a cooperative project with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Nature Conservancy, CAL FIRE, and the State Water Resources Control Board to improve forest health and reduce wildfire risk on 1,600 acres of mixed conifer forest owned by the American River Conservancy, located west of Lake Tahoe and approximately 4 miles south of Donner Summit in Placer County. This location map shows the project area relative to Lake Tahoe to the east and Truckee to the northeast. You can also see French Meadows and Hellhole reservoirs south of the project area, which is the downstream end of these watersheds. Next slide, please. In 2015, WCB contributed $3.5 million to the fee title purchase of the 10,115-acre American River Headwaters property, which contains the headwaters of the Middle and North Fork of the American River. This property had a history of selective logging and wildfire suppression, resulting in excessively dense conifer stands that are vulnerable to high-severity fires. This photo shows an example of the dense, fire-prone forests in the project area that need to be thinned. These dense forest conditions are vulnerable to drought-related tree mortality and high-severity wildfire that degrade wildlife habitat and ecosystem services, like water quality. Post-fire erosion and sedimentation in these watersheds also stand to affect the French Meadows and Hellhole reservoirs, which are directly downstream of the property. Next slide, please. This project will use mechanical removal and hand thinning methods to thin 1,600 acres of dense young conifers. These thinning operations will increase the diversity of conifer species and age classes, resulting in a more heterogeneous and resilient forest. This photo shows an example of a thin forest stand similar to what will be accomplished through this project. Next slide, please. This next photo will show a side-by-side comparison between the unthinned forest on the left and thin forest on the right of this service road. Next slide, please. This last photo will show conifer regrowth in a stand that was thinned, and you can see masticated material in the foreground of this photo. Overall project goals include increasing resiliency to wildfire, drought, and climate change, increasing stream flow and water production while decreasing erosion, and enhancing wildlife habitat. Staff recommends the project as proposed. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have, and on the call today we also have Elena DeLacy, Executive Director at the American River Conservancy, and Autumn Gronberg, Forest Restoration Manager at the American River Conservancy. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Judah. And I do want to, for the record, we did receive one letter of support for this project from Angela Avery, who's the Executive Officer of the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. So is there any board member comments or questions for Judah or me? Great, seeing none. We do have one speaker card that was submitted for this from Autumn Gronborg with the American River Conservancy. Autumn?
Hi, am I unmuted?
No, you're fine. We can hear you.
Okay. I would just like to say on behalf of the American River Conservancy, thank you for considering funding our project, and also thank you for funding our initial purchase of this project. And we hope that you guys can support our future projects.
Great, thank you. So is there any other public comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 28. It's the Rimfire Forest Restoration Project, Phase 2. This is to consider an allocation of a grant to Tuolumne County for a cooperative project with a number of organizations. Judah will also present the board this project this morning.
Thank you, John. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to the County of Tuolumne for a cooperative project with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, CAL FIRE, U.S. Forest Service, and U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to restore 6,434 acres of mixed conifer forest that burned as part of the Rimfire on Stanislaus National Forest in Tuolumne County. This location map shows the project area east of Sonora and west of Yosemite National Park. The project area is situated within the Stanislaus National Forest. Next slide, please. In 2013, the Rimfire burned over 257,000 acres, with more than 90,000 acres burning at high severity. 98% of the burn area was within the Tuolumne watershed, a key water source for the Central Valley and the Bay Area. This photo shows a post-burn slope with standing dead trees and dense shrub regrowth. Without active reforestation, high-severity burn patches are at risk of permanently converting from a mixed conifer forest to a shrub chaparral vegetation type. Next slide, please. This next photo shows more of the burned area and dense shrub regrowth. These shrubs, which are several feet tall, also hold many fallen trunks that would contribute to surface fuels in the event of a future fire. To help address the impacts from the catastrophic Rimfire, a diverse group of stakeholders, including Stanislaus National Forest, formed the Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions Forest Collaborative and negotiated a common ground reforestation plan. This Rimfire reforestation plan was designed to restore a forest mosaic on the landscape, creating habitat, protecting water quality, and ensuring the continued existence of a vibrant and thriving landscape. Next slide, please. This next photo will show some spared trees in a burn area that does still need fuel reduction to avoid high severity fire in the future, however. Next slide, please. And this last photo shows a burned area where hazardous fire fuels have been reduced, preserving remaining live trees as well as select ecologically important snags. WCB funded an earlier phase of Rimfire forest restoration in 2016 with a $3,510,000 grant to Tuolumne River Land Trust to restore and enhance habitat impacted by the Rimfire. The proposed project further advances the Rimfire reforestation plan by restoring an additional 6,434 acres of mixed conifer forest using an array of replanting treatments to create an old forest and open canopy mosaic. This post-fire recovery work is critical for restoring habitat and improving ecosystem resilience. Staff recommends the project as proposed. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have. We have several project representatives on the call today, including Jad Curdy, Administrative Analyst with Tuolumne County, and Byron Krempel, Headwaters Program Director with the Tuolumne River Trust, who can help answer specific project questions if need be. Thank you.
Thank you, Judah. We did receive 3 letters of support, one from Jason Kuiken, Forest Supervisor, the Stanislaus National Forest, Byron Kemperl, Headwaters Forest Program Manager at Tuolumne River Trust, and Patrick Kopel, Chair of the Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions. With that, is there any board member comments or questions? Great, hearing none. We did receive a speaker card from Byron Kemple, Headwaters Program Director, Tuolumne River Trust.
Hi, yes, my name is Byron Krempel, and I'm the Headwaters Program Director for the Tuolumne River Trust. And I just wanted to thank the WCB Board on behalf of all upstream and downstream stakeholders and beneficiaries for continuing to support restoration efforts within the footprint of the 2013 Rimfire.
Great, thank you. And then Jad Curdy, he commented in the chat side that he would like to speak on this item. Jad? Okay. And then Patrick Copel, Executive Director of Tuolumne River Trust. Patrick?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Patrick Copel, and I'm the Executive Director of the Tuolumne River Trust, but I'm the current chair of this Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions Forest Collaborative. We call it YSS, and I'm offering these comments on behalf of YSS, which is one of the partners in this project. Just a brief overview of what YSS is. We're a highly diverse coalition of interests. We share a common goal of restoring and maintaining healthy forests and watersheds, fire-safe communities, and sustainable local economies. We have 26 member agencies and organizations, including representatives from local environmental, timber, recreation groups, and local government agencies. YSS was formed in 2010 to identify common ground solutions to support ecological forest restoration and prevent a large-scale, high-severity wildfire from burning up our forests. And we focus primarily on the Stanislaus National Forest and private lands in Tuolumne County. We've played an instrumental role in working together to identify common ground actions to help the landscape recover from the rim fire, and including the large-scale reforestation plan. This proposal is one phase of the broader reforestation plan that YSS supported. As Judah mentioned, there are thousands and thousands of acres that burned at high severity, and many of those acres have little to no regeneration of trees because the seed bank was incinerated. So bottom line is that YSS is strongly supportive of this project to get trees growing back on the landscape. I want to thank the WCB board for considering this project and all the support that the WCB provides for conservation in California. And also want to give props to staff for the excellent job they've done in working with Tuolumne County and YSS and other partners through this process. So thanks so much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Hi, this is Chad. Do you mind if I speak now?
No, please.
Sorry, I had a problem with the muting. I just wanted to say that, on behalf of the Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors, I wanted to express their wholehearted support for this project. They have a, great appreciation for the continued partnership with the Forest Service, Tuolumne River Trust, and YSS organization as a whole. And, wanted to thank the Wildlife Conservation Board for the potential for this funding opportunity. The rim fire was devastating, and this funding will allow us to accomplish a significant amount of the forest management work needed there.
Great, thank you, Jan. Okay, hearing or seeing no other public comments, we'll move on to item number 29. This is to consider a grant to East Regional Park District for the Doolittle Boat Launch Facility improvements in Alameda County. Heather McIntyre on our staff will present the project. Heather.
Thank you, John. This proposal is to consider a $750,000 grant to the East Bay Regional Park District to make public access improvements to the Doolittle Boat Launch Facility in the Martin Luther King Jr. Regional Shoreline. The project is in the city of Oakland in Alameda County. The Doolittle Boat Launch is within Shoreline Park, which is directly adjacent to the Oakland Airport. The property is owned by the Port of Oakland. Next slide, please. The Doolittle Boat Launch provides access to San Leandro Bay, the Oakland Estuary, and Arrowhead Marsh. It also connects to the San Francisco Bay Water Trail. Visitors come to the shoreline to walk, ride bikes, picnic, and fish. Arrowhead Marsh is a stopover on the Pacific Flyway and provides excellent bird watching. The launch is used by Bay Area residents to launch motorized and non-motorized boats. East Bay Park Regional District Regional Park District also uses the ramp for educational and water safety programs. The Doolittle boat launch facility is only partially open to the public. In 2016, one of the 2 floating docks had to be removed for safety reasons. The slide that you're looking at shows the boat launch with only a single float and 1 missing, damaged docks, and the need for shore erosion protection. The Park District estimates a 40% decline in boat launch use since the partial closure. The ramp and remaining dock are open to public use. However, the concrete ramp is crumbling and the dock does not allow boaters to launch at low or high tides, nor does it accommodate sea level rise. Currently, the facility does not comply with ADA standards. This project is located within a disadvantaged community and within a 1.5-mile radius of a severely disadvantaged community. Next slide, please. The Doolittle Boat Launch Facility Improvements project will result in a fully functional, open to the public boat launch with ADA accessibility and amenities for boaters. Specifically, this project will demolish and replace the existing boat launch and increase the ramp length to better accommodate tides and sea level rise. It will add shoreline protection and slurry seal and restripe the parking lot and add 3 ADA parking stalls and construct a wash and dry station for non-motorized boaters. Once completed, the Oakland area will have a fully operational 2-lane boat launch for both motorized and non-motorized boats, a safe ADA compliant parking lot, ADA path of travel to the boat launch, and a place for visitors to rig and wash their non-motorized watercraft. In addition, the new boat launch will provide public use during extreme tides and sea level rise, and as sea levels rise. Next slide, please. Staff recommends the board approve the project as proposed. Katy Hornbeck, the acting grants manager, and Toby Perry, the project manager, are with us online today. They're from East Bay Regional Parks, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Heather. Any board member comments or questions?
Yeah, John, this is Eric. I just have one comment, and it's a general comment about boat ranch launches in general, and that is that, not particular to this project, but in general, as we're evaluating these, we should encourage designs that take into account social separation. Boat launches have been one of the real bottlenecks and have been keeping people off the water because there's not enough room for parking. There's too much congregation right at the ramps. And so as we look forward, given the new reality, we ought to make that something we look to and require from projects, that they include a social distancing component.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Any other board member comments? Okay, we did receive one speaker card from Katy Hornbeck. Would you like to speak at this time?
No, thank you. I think my comment at the beginning is sufficient for this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, anyone else in the public arena would like to comment at this time? All right, seeing none or hearing none, we'll move on to item number 30, the Avila Pier Rehabilitation Project. We did receive 2 letters of support for this project. One from Adam Hill, Supervisor, District 3, San Luis Obispo County Board of Supervisors, and Tom Swem, President, Friends of Via Pier Incorporated. Heather will also present this project this morning. Heather.
All right, thank you, John. This proposal is to consider a $1.25 million grant to the Port San Luis Harbor District for the rehabilitation of Avila Pier. Avila Pier is located on California's central coast in Avila Beach, between the communities of Pismo Beach and San Luis Obispo in San Luis Obispo County. Next slide, please. In 1869, construction of the People's Wharf in San Luis Obispo Bay provided a main shipping hub for the entire county. And just 9 years later, a huge storm destroyed it. But almost immediately, planning and construction began for a new pier, Avila Pier. And in 1908, Avila Pier was open to the public. The pier has endured storms, high surf events, and decay. Repairs have kept the pier from functioning have kept the pier functioning. However, recent storms have caused extensive damage, resulting in the closure of Avila Pier in 2015. Additional repairs enabled a portion of the pier to be reopened, but the seaward half remains closed. Next slide, please. This is just a quick tour of pier parts. So the uprights going from the water to the base of the pier are the piles. Across the top of the piles is the pile cap. And then the stringers go the length of the pier. They're kind of goldish in color there. And then on top of the stringers is the decking, which is the part that the people walk on. Next slide, please. The deck has spacing to allow for wave attenuation. Some spacing is quite large. At a visit to the pier last year, I saw a small child who was afraid to cross one particularly daunting gap. The cross did require adult intervention. But wave attenuation can be addressed with smaller gaps, and the picture to your right shows the deck with some of the larger gaps filled. Next slide, please. The vertical photograph on your left shows the location of a missing pile. If you look at the pile cap between the two metal brackets, you can see there's a scar where there should actually be a pile there. And on the photo on your right, you can see the stringers. That's the part that supports the deck, and they're cracked all the way through. These are some of the damages that need repair. Next slide, please. The piles show damage underwater as well as above. Next slide, please. The pier is in need of repair. The WCB grant will aid in reopening the entire pier to the public. Specifically, the project will repair and replace piles, repair pile caps, and repair the upper pier, including the decking, stringers, and hardware, etc., those sorts of things. Also, this project will install an ADA corridor the length of the pier. As part of the larger project, the Avila Pier boat launch will also be replaced. Next slide, please. This project will enable the pier to reopen to locals and visitors, providing fishing, boating, and wildlife viewing opportunities. In 2015, humpback whales were spotted in San Luis Bay, and this image shows visitors whale watching from Avila Pier. Staff recommends the board approve the project as proposed. Chris Munson, the facilities manager of the Port San Luis Harbor District, is in the audience today, and we will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Any board member comments? Questions? All right, hearing none. Any public comments? We did receive one speaker card from Chris Munson from the Port San Luis Harbor District. So,
yes, hello. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you for your consideration on this project. I wanted to say thank you to Heather McIntyre. She's been a great help through this whole process. And a special thanks to Nellie, who worked hard on the application and the continued support of our harbor manager and commissioners. We've been working on this to find ways to safely reopen the pier for the last 5 years. After various studies and inspections, we're finally at the final stages of the repair plan, and we're ready to begin the rehabilitation. We're very excited to begin, and we have tremendous support from the community and its leaders, including our Board of Commissioners. The last major hurdle is funding, which we're hoping the board will consider us for.
great, thank you. Any other public comments? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 31, the Bolsa Chica Conservancy Interpretive Center Improvement Project down in Orange County. Heather will also present this project.
Thank you. This proposal is to consider a $689,000 grant to the Bolsa Chica Conservancy for the modifications of a new interpretive center, new interpretive displays, and a new ADA accessible restroom. The Bolsa Chica Interpretive Center is located on California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve. The reserve is in Huntington Beach, located at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and Warner Avenue in Orange County. Next slide, please. The Bolsa Chica Reserve is one of California's most significant coastal estuaries. It includes 1,300 acres of open water, mudflats, salt marsh, coastal dunes, seabird nesting islands, riparian areas, and freshwater marsh. This is the largest saltwater estuary between Monterey Bay and the Tijuana River estuary. The reserve's 5 miles of trails are popular with locals, visitors, and students for bird and wildlife viewing. The Interpretive Center at the trailhead provides educational opportunities for everyone. The existing Interpretive Center includes exhibits on estuarine and nearshore coastal ecosystems, marine species, wildlife, and birds found in the reserve. The Interpretive Center provides educational opportunity within a highly urbanized area in Southern California. Next slide, please. The current Interpretive Center is an old modular building with portable toilets and sheds for storage. The existing buildings were purchased used and installed on site in 1994. They have seen a lot of use in 26 years. But the buildings no longer provide the needed spaces or flexibility for staff or visitors. Next slide, please. The Bolsa Chica Conservancy will remove and replace the existing modular building and sheds with 2 new modular buildings. The L-shaped design is more functional and provides better flow between areas. The second building replaces the existing sheds and the portable toilets. The new facility will provide better access and more educational opportunities in the reserve. Next slide, please. Specifically, the Wildlife Conservation Board will fund modifications within the building to allow for interpretive spaces, a classroom, laboratory, offices, storage, and a public restroom that is ADA compliant. In addition, the project will design, construct, and install interpretive displays and signage. Bilingual signage is under consideration. The project will also install a rainwater and fog harvest system, and water from the system will be used to water landscaping. The project will also install siding between the 2 buildings, linking them and making a more functional and cohesive space. Next slide, please. The building improvements will facilitate access to the wildlife-oriented recreation at the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve and promote awareness of wetland ecosystems. Staff recommends the board approve the project as proposed. Patrick Brendan, the Chief Executive Officer from the Bolsa Chica Conservancy, is in the audience today, and we are here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Heather. We did receive 1 letter of support on this project from Jennifer Lucchese, the Executive Officer of the California State Lands Commission. And so is there any board member comments or questions for Heather? Okay, we did receive 1 speaker card on this, and that's from Chris Munson. I'm Ed Sullivan. No, I'm sorry. Patrick Brendan. Many notes. Patrick Brendan?
Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, good afternoon to everyone, and on behalf of the Bolsa Chica Conservancy, our board, our staff members, and our grateful community, we just want to thank the board for considering our project. Also want to especially put out my thanks to Heather McIntyre for her help and kind of helping us navigate through the whole process and get to this stage. We are excited about the change. The current facility, as you heard, has been in place since 1994, and when it was installed in 94, it was already used and in not an ideal state. So it is tired, it's dilapidated, and this is going to be an exciting change for the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve, providing our visitors with a dynamic new entry point where they can really learn about the wetlands, why they're important, and how they integrate with the entire watershed system in Southern California. So we look forward to the opportunity to put these funds to great use to expand our educational offerings, to increase our class space, our space for lab work, and to continue to expand our reach into the students from disadvantaged communities in our area. So again, thank you so much. We are excited also to announce that this morning our parking lots at the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve have been reopened for public access. Our trails have been open, but now we have parking lots as well. So again, thank you so much for your time and your consideration today.
Thank you, Patrick. So any other public member comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 32, the Santa Cruz Mountains Linkages Coyote Ridge Expansion 1 project in Santa Clara County. Kurt Weber on our staff will present the project this morning. Kurt, or this afternoon.
Great, thanks, John. This project is to consider a grant to the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency for a cooperative project with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Moore Foundation. The project, Santa Cruz Mountain Linkages, also known as Coyote Ridge, it's located approximately 4 miles southeast of the city of San Jose. The protection of Coyote Ridge will extend a contiguous 325,000 acre complex of publicly and privately protected lands in the Diablo Range. The protected area includes the 87,000 acre Henry W. Coe State Park and the 28,500 acre San Felipe Ranch, which was placed under conservation easement in 2008 and is located less than 2 miles east of the property. Next slide, please. The property consists of moderately steep hills, rounded ridge tops, and flowing valleys. Elevations range from about 635 feet to nearly 1,450 feet atop Coyote Ridge. Coyote Ridge supports numerous aquatic features, including 3 year-round streams that together are over 12 miles in length. The property also contains numerous springs, wetlands, and ponds. The western slope provides beneficial upstream habitat components for Coyote Creek, which is designated as critical habitat for the federally threatened steelhead trout. Immediately west of the property is 1,800 acres of protected lands enrolled in the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency Reserve System and managed by the Santa Clara County Open Space Authority for habitat and open space values. Next slide, please. The property will be available for future public use and provides an outstanding opportunity for recreation, such as hiking and horseback riding on existing ranch roads and trails. A section of dirt road along Coyote Ridge is proposed to become a future segment of the Bay Area Ridge Trail. The property lies within CDFW's Santa Cruz Mountain Linkages Conceptual Area Protection Plan, which prioritizes acquisition of privately owned parcels to increase or enhance habitat, migration corridors, and connectivity. Next slide, please. Once the acquisition is completed, the property will be enrolled in the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has identified 28 species of plants and animals, including 14 federally listed species, which occur primarily or exclusively on serpentine soils in the San Francisco Bay Area. One of the largest concentrations of serpentine soils is found along the Coyote Ridge. Consistent with this, the property provides habitat for the federally threatened California red-legged frog and the state and federally threatened California tiger salamander. Next slide, please. The title to the property will initially be held by the Habitat Agency. After recording the conservation easement, title will then be transferred to the Open Space Authority at some future point. Once transferred, the Habitat Agency will continue to monitor the property annually to ensure that the conservation easement grant terms are being honored. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that the board approve this project as proposed. And online today are Edmund Sullivan with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, Kevin Knowles, Charlie Vile with UTC, and Chris Kelly of the Conservation Fund. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Kurt. Any board member comments or questions? Right, hearing none. We did have one speaker card from from Ed Sullivan, Executive Officer of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency.
Hi there, John. Can you hear me okay?
I can. You're fine.
Okay, great. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for considering this item and this important acquisition for the HCP-NCCP. The partnership between WCB and our NCCP is critical for our program's success. It's been great working with your staff. This has been a long process, and they've been patient and worked collaboratively with us through the 2 years it took to finally close on this property. And I'd also like to thank the Moore Foundation and the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. They're really important partners in acquiring land and managing land in this landscape. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other public comments?
John, there is a comment from Matt Freeman with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority that wants to speak.
Okay, Matt.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Matt Freeman, Assistant General Manager with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. We are so very pleased to support this project to expand the size of Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve by another 1,500 acres. And as Ed mentioned, as the long-term owner and manager of the property, we really look forward to our continued partnership, excuse me, with the Habitat Agency to restore and implement projects to implement the Habitat Conservation Plan and the Natural Community Conservation Plan. As well, we really aim to manage the property to enhance the quality of the landscape linkage that connects this property to Coyote Valley and to the Santa Cruz Mountains beyond, connecting over 1 million acres of core habitat. Thanks so much for your consideration. I'd also like to acknowledge our partners at the Habitat Agency, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Matt. Any other public comments? Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on to item number 33. This is the Coyote Valley Landscape Linkage Project, Sobrato South in Santa Clara County. Mr. Joe Navari on our staff will present this project this morning. Sure.
Thank you, John. This project is to consider the allocation for a grant to Santa Clara County Open Space Authority for a cooperative project with Peninsula Open Space Trust to acquire 235 acres of land known as the Sobrato South property for the protection of a critical open space wildlife corridor. In addition to this corridor, the project will protect wetlands, valley oaks, and grasslands. The Sobrato South project will enhance wildlife linkages and provide future public use opportunities. As you can see from the slide here, the Sobrato South property is located between Morgan Hill and San Jose. The property is part of a larger acquisition effort to protect a wildlife corridor between the Santa Cruz Mountains on the east side of the valley, on the west side of the valley, and the Diablo Range on the east. This connection will help protect future biodiversity in a rapidly expanding, highly developable part of California. In addition to being part of a larger project to protect rare and endangered wildlife species, the project will provide community recreational access. In 2013, the Coyote Valley Corridor project started with the drafting and adoption of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Conservation Plan and Natural Communities Conservation Plan. The plan outlines a landscape-level conservation strategy, part of which is the Sobrato South property acquisition. The property being purchased by the Santa Clara County Open Space Authority is being purchased by the Santa Clara County Open Space Authority for a total Department of General Services approved appraised value of $16 million, of which $10 million is proposed to come from the Wildlife Conservation Board. Next slide, please. The wetlands here are identified as an important ecological value in the NCCP HCP plan. In addition to the wetland and wildlife benefits, the property is the planned connection route for two hiking trails, the Bay Area Ridge Trail and the Juan Bautista de Anza National Historic Trail. Next slide, please. The wetlands associated with Coyote Creek and the property are not only important to special status species, but also provide flood control to surrounding communities. Sobrato South contains substantial habitat for California tiger salamander, red-legged frog, tricolored blackbird, American badger, and burrowing owl, all of which are known to occur on and around the subject property. This slide in particular is a really good example of the potential wildlife corridor here at the Coyote Valley. In this section, the valley narrows, allowing the movement of animals across the valley here. Next slide, please. The acquisition of the Sobrato South property would protect it from future development and allow for large-scale restoration of the creek and wetland complex. Next slide, please.
I would go ahead, Joe. I would go ahead and just keep talking, and
okay.
the slide will come up. There's there's a pretty big delay between slides. So just, yeah, well, the slides will catch up with you. Sorry to interrupt.
So because of the strong local support for the project and the above described needs, we would recommend that the board approve the project as proposed. And here today we have Matt Freeman, the OSA Assistant General Manager, Megan Dreger from OSA, Walter Moore from Post, Noel Thurlow from Post, and Jennifer Kopek from Post as well.
Great, thank you, Joe. And I would just like to let the board know that this project fell under the appraisal cap for the board to independently contract for its own appraisal, and then subsequently have that appraisal independently reviewed, and then also put that review up on our website 30 days in advance of your consideration. That was done. The independent review went up in April. And so we did the independent review and then also subsequently received Department of General Services approval for that process. So with that, I don't have any letters of support. Is there any board member comments or questions? Seeing none, I know Matt Freeman had asked to speak from a public comment side. Matt, anything to add?
Thank you, John. Hello again, members of the board. On behalf of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, I want to thank you for your consideration of this critical funding approval. This time last year, we did not know that we were on the cusp of achieving an extraordinary new conservation future for the Coyote Valley, as articulated in AB 948, which established the Coyote Valley Conservation Program. Coyote Valley truly is a resource of state significance, and its many conservation values are reflected in the Sobrato South property. It closes the critical gap in a landscape linkage connecting over 1 million acres in the Santa Cruz Mountains to Coyote Ridge and the Diablo Range. The property's riparian vegetation and wetlands provide habitat for many rare species, and these vital floodplain features serve as natural infrastructure, capturing stormwater and reducing downstream flooding impacts to urban San Jose. So funding from WCB will allow the authority to add this property to our 30,000 acre system of protected lands and to plan and manage the property to implement the landscape scale conservation vision that Joe just articulated. And it'll also allow us to establish a truly unique open space preserve within the city of San Jose, the nation's 10th largest city. So again, I'd like to express our appreciation for your excellent staff who moved this project forward, and to our partners in conservation at the Peninsula Open Space Trust, who worked so tirelessly to get this property under contract. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, any other comments? Okay, moving on to item number 34. This is to consider a project for the Matilaha Dam. We did receive several letters of support for this project. One from Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, 19th Senate District, Steve Bennett, Supervisor, Ventura County Board of Supervisors, Curtis Knight, Executive Director of the California Trout, Tom Maloney, Executive Director of the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, Derek Pulteney, Executive Director of the Ventura Land Trust, Dan Silver, Executive Director of the Endangered Habitats League, Russell Marlowe, Chair, Santa Clara River Steelhead Coalition, and Paul Jenkins, Coordinator of the Matilaha Coalition, Surfrider Foundation, the Ventura County Chapter. So with that, Don Crocker will present the project this morning. Don.
All right, thank you, John. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to the Ventura County Watershed Protection District for a planning project that will complete final design plans for Matilaha Dam removal and for 3 downstream levee construction and rehabilitation projects as essential components of the Matilaha Dam ecosystem restoration project. Next slide, please. When the slide flips, you'll see a picture of Matilaha Dam in Ventura County. It's about 16 miles from the Pacific Ocean and just over half a mile from where Matilaha Creek joins the Ventura River. The dam was constructed in 1947 to impound an initial volume of 7,000 acre-feet and was intended for water supply, flood protection, and recreational uses. Unfortunately, it is also a complete fish passage barrier that blocks access to some of the best southern steelhead spawning habitat in the watershed. Next slide, please. And as the dam prevents fish from moving upstream, it also traps sediment moving downstream. This deprives downstream floodplains, the Ventura River estuary, and adjacent coastal areas of much-needed sand and cobbles. This trapped sediment has accumulated to the point that Matilaha Reservoir has lost approximately 98% of its original storage capacity and now impounds less than 150 acre-feet. The picture shown here was taken while standing on the dam and looking at an area that should be deep water, but is actually dominated by emergent vegetation, which is typical of shallow water habitats. The reservoir now has a maximum depth around 6 feet, and as a result, the dam provides virtually no functional benefit. Making matters worse is the dam is known to be deteriorating from alkali-silica reaction, which may eventually compromise its structural ability. Next slide, please. With the dam decaying and providing none of its intended benefits, focus is shifted to removing the dam and restoring access to historical spawning grounds of the federally endangered southern steelhead. Because of this, Matilaha Dam removal has been identified by the National Marine Fisheries Service as a priority recovery action for the southern steelhead, and the dam is also included in the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Fish Passage Priority List. And beyond steelhead, restoring the natural hydrology will benefit many sensitive riparian and terrestrial species in the watershed. Next slide, please. This grant will finalize the designs for dam removal using a natural sediment transport approach that was selected as the preferred alternative in 2016. The plan calls for cutting 2 12-foot diameter orifices into, but not entirely through the dam, which will leave a short portion of structural concrete on the upstream face. The location of these orifices on the dam face can be seen here in red. Then the project team will wait until a significant rain event is forecasted, at which point explosive charges will be placed against the remaining structural concrete and the orifice will be blasted open to initiate flushing through the dam. This approach allows for dam demolition without costly large-scale sediment excavation or dredging and will help to initiate natural restoration of the stream channel by restoring sediment transport. Next slide, please. Once the Matilaha Dam is removed, the current hydrology of the Ventura River will be altered in ways that could negatively impact downstream residential and agricultural activities. Mitigating these impacts is a crucial component of dam removal, so this grant will also provide the planning necessary for Miners Oak Levee, Live Oak Acres Levee, and Casita Spring Levee to be updated to meet FEMA certification requirements under post-dam removal conditions. Next slide, please. Once completed, removal of the dam will allow for the restoration of over 2,000 acres of varied riparian habitats, restore access to 17.3 miles of high-quality southern steelhead spawning and rearing habitat, and restart the natural transport of sediments that will support downstream habitat as well as wetland and nearshore habitats near the Ventura River Delta. Therefore, staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed. On the phone are Peter Shadai, Martha Symes, and David Yardis from the Ventura County Watershed Protection District. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So any board member comments?
Yeah, Jen, I'd like to weigh in on this one.
Great.
Just at a personal level, this is a passion project of mine. And I want for board members to realize it fits within an even bigger context where the board, the department, resources agency are active from sea to source. So as staff just described, an element of this project is rewilding an important creek and giving a chance for important salmon steelhead to find their home again. These headwaters are pretty much protected in the Cleveland National Forest. The fish just can't get there. It's also a project that's broadly supported across all levels of this local community. Just see that the grantee is the local county public works entity. In addition, in the middle part of the Ventura River, the WCB and agency are active with the land trust. There are a lot of floodplain reconnection projects under discussion being designed. And then if you go out to the mouth of the Ventura River, the city itself and the county are looking at how to build resiliency and adaptability to the coastline as sea level rise happens. And it turns out the very gravel behind this dam may help that endeavor out at the source. So the board's engagement on this dam removal fits within even a bigger effort to restore this region holistically from sea to source.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other board member comments?
Yes, I have one, John.
Yes, hi, Fran.
Hey, hi. I'm very familiar with this project, and I'll just not try to reiterate what Chuck said, but this has been a tremendously important goal and project and dream of thousands of Ventura County residents in the surrounding areas. I had the honor to represent Ventura County since 2000 in the legislature and taught in the county for years and years. Very familiar with this. And absolutely right, it's obsolete for water storage and doesn't help with flood protection. The down coastal areas are really excited about sand, which will help with some sea level rise and climate adaptation strategies. And just so you know, there's ongoing efforts through Patagonia and others in supporting a river parkway going up the Ventura River, connecting the coast 16 miles away to up where the dam is now located. So this is a project I've been very interested in, and I'm so thrilled that the Wildlife Conservation Board is considering such a substantive contribution that will really help with the final design plans. I think there is interest in among some funding options in putting up the funds for final removal of this dam. So it's a win-win all the way around with tremendous community support. So thank you very much, all to the staff members. And Chuck, you've been championing this for years. This is a very exciting project for a small, relatively small county of less than 800,000 people.
Great, thank you, Senator. Any other board comments? Any public comments on this? I have no speaker cards.
John, I did get an email. I did get an email right before I started. Peter Shaddai, Deputy Director of the Ventura County Watershed Protection District, would like to talk.
Please.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name is Peter Shaddai. I'm a Deputy Director with the Ventura County Watershed Protection District. We're part of Ventura County Public Works, County of Ventura. I just wanted to acknowledge a lot of the stakeholders that have heavily involvement in the project. As was mentioned, the Surfrider and Matillahawk Coalition, the Patagonia, they've been very involved with the project. We've had Resources Legacy Fund, and of course our state partners, California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Coastal Conservancy have invested quite a bit of money into this project. This is a very exciting grant for us. As some of you may know, we're currently working on the completion of a CDFW grant to get through the preliminary design work and the updating the secret document, at which point we are now ready to go into final design. So this grant really will help move the project to be shovel ready. We're all anticipating future funding for the project, and of course the most important thing to be able to qualify for that is to be shovel ready, which this grant will help us do. So just want to thank Wildlife Conservation Board for all the support, and for Don Crocker and all his work on the project getting to where we are today. Very exciting. I thank you again for the support and the consideration for this grant.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Okay, any other public comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 35, the Smith Neck Creek Wildlife Area Expansion Project. We did receive one comment letter from James Baird, the chairman of the Sierra County Board of Supervisors. And while the county is not opposing this project, they did want me to iterate three concerns that they had, and just acknowledgement that they would like the Department of Fish and Wildlife and WCB to work with them on. And the first is the payment of in lieu fees. The second is the grazing to continue on the site and to provide participation in that grazing process by the Board of Supervisors. And then lastly is to allow an ATV use consistent with proper protocols by any future lessor for grazing management. And so I just like to really quickly opine on those three things. The department is paying the in lieu fees when they are able. The funding for the payment of in lieu fees, and Chuck can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's provided through the legislative budget process. And then on the grazing aspect, the department does graze the existing wildlife area, and talking with regional staff, they do anticipate to graze this property as well in the future. But the grazing, selecting a grazer would have to go through a request for proposal process, and the department, once it gets it under ownership and figures out the management of the site, they will conduct the RFP for grazing. So with that, I will ask Sadie Smith on our staff to present you the information. Sadie?
Sure. Let me interject and just, everyone take a moment, look at your phone. If you're not speaking, go ahead and hit the mute button. We're getting a little feedback. We're really close as a collection of 100 people to being done with the meeting with extraordinary mute button compliance, so thank you. And on that note, I think we've got maybe 2 or 3 more presentations. We're going to run a touch past 1, but as we end the presentations, we'll come back to a global motion discussion at the board.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, John. This proposal is to consider the acquisition of 976 acres of land by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife as an expansion of CDFW's Smith Neck Creek Wildlife Area. As shown on the map, the property is located along Smith Neck Creek in the southeast corner of Sierra Valley, under 2 miles south of the town of Loyalton. Sierra Brooks, a private residential development, is across the county road. Irrigated agricultural lands dominate to the north and northwest of the property, while mountainous terrain rises in all other directions. The expansive Tahoe National Forest and other U.S. Forest Service property surrounds the Sierra Valley and the proposed acquisition. The property is adjacent to the northern boundary of the 1,400-acre CDFW-owned Smith Neck Creek Wildlife Area. The CDFW Antelope Valley Wildlife Area is to the west and Hallelujah Junction Wildlife Area to the east. Together, this public land provides critical winter range habitat for the Loyalton Truckee interstate deer herd. The area contains major migration corridors used by deer as they travel between seasonal ranges. Next slide, please. This is the entrance of the property from Smith Neck Road. The property is located within CDFW's Sierra Valley Truckee River Conceptual Area Protection Plan, or CAP, and is considered a high priority acquisition by CDFW. The primary objectives of the CAP include to conserve and enhance biodiversity and maintain habitat linkages to help protect elevation gradients, which allows species to migrate and adapt to climate change. Slide, please. Habitat on site consists of Sierra mixed conifer with surface vegetation of sagebrush, grasslands, bitterbrush, and seasonal drainage. Slide. In addition to the deer herd, the property supports mountain lion, bobcat, badger, and pronghorn. Also, the property is frequented by several raptor species, including golden eagle, Swainson's hawk, and red-tailed hawk. Historically, the property has been used for livestock grazing and hunting. The current owner rents the property to a local rancher for livestock grazing through an oral agreement that is renewed annually. Slide. CDFW will be the owner in fee simple of this 976-acre acquisition and will add this property to the adjacent Smith Neck Creek wildlife area. Slide. CDFW regional staff anticipates that nominal management costs would be associated with some perimeter fencing and signage for the property. Given the property's location adjacent to the wildlife area, additional management funds for staffing would not be required. Management of the wildlife area is provided consistent with the CDFW Antelope Valley and Smith Neck Creek wildlife areas land management plan. Public access to the wildlife area is currently provided for recreational opportunities, including hunting, hiking, wildlife viewing, bird watching, and photography. Staff recommends that the WCB approve this project as proposed. Stacy Anderson, CDFW Unit Wildlife Biologist for Sierra and Plumas counties, is in the audience today, and we will be happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadie. Any board member comments? Okay, hearing now, we did receive a speaker card, or no, they've decided not to speak, so never mind about that. So any other members of the public wishing to speak? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 36, the last project in the presentation calendar. It's for Taylor Yard, the G2 Early Activation Project in Los Angeles County. Elizabeth Huber on our staff will provide the information.
Thank you, John. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to the City of Los Angeles for a cooperative project with the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy to complete planning and permitting for public access improvements at the G2 unit of Taylor Yard, located approximately a mile east of I-5 in Los Angeles. The project location is a 6-acre portion of the G2 unit of the former Taylor Yard rail yard, and the property is bounded by the Los Angeles River, the Rio de Los Angeles State Park, as you can see on the slide there, the G1 parcel, which is also owned by state parks to the north, and the Metrolink Central Maintenance Facility, which is just to the south. Next slide, please. The G2 site is a former active rail yard of the Union Pacific Railroad and was used for maintenance and fueling trains from the early 1900s until 2006. The 42-acre G2 parcel was acquired by the City of Los Angeles in 2017 from the railroad. Following the purchase, 2 easements on a total of 12 acres of the G2 site were funded by WCB, led by the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority and the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. Next slide, please. This project is an important part of the long-range planning efforts for the area, including the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan and the Army Corps 2016 Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study. In addition, the G2 site is located near existing recreational and interpretive sites, including the state park, the river, as well as the Sotomayor Center for Arts and Sciences, which is a complex of high schools and middle schools nearby. This will provide a unique opportunity to create a regional multi-benefit park with benefits to include enhancing habitat, providing significant recreation and interpretive opportunities, and promoting access to the Los Angeles River. Next slide, please. The WCB-funded project will include planning and design for public access features, including 30, 60, and 90% design plans, along with a completed CEQA document, community outreach, and project management. This public access project would be the first project implemented on the G2 parcel, and the project will include areas for habitat viewing, interpretive signs, vegetation improvement, and facilities for educational and nature programming near the urban setting. The city has currently entered a planning and feasibility study process, and 3 conceptual designs are in review. Next slide, please. Along with this project, multiple planning efforts are being coordinated at the site for habitat restoration, along with remediation and other activities funded by other sources. These have all been identified as priorities or early activation projects for implementation. Conversion of the site to public parkland and habitat restoration will also be completed by implementing a series of phased projects to ensure that the public is allowed safe access to the site. Next slide, please. All features in the project design will be compliant with the American with Disabilities Act, including wildlife viewing opportunities and trails with interpretive signage. And the project is also within a mile of a severely disadvantaged community, and project implementation will provide important public access and enhancement of wildlife-friendly recreational opportunities. Next slide, please. The city will conduct community engagement and public meetings with design workshops held to inform the public and gain input on project designs, including multi-benefit features, wildlife habitat enhancement, and healthy watershed improvement. During 2 early public events conducted for project scoping in 2018, more than 500 participants attended in person, along with over 1,300 completed online surveys. Next slide, please. The current feasibility study drafted by the city focuses on 3 alternatives, with 2 illustrated here. And the conceptual designs each include features with public access infrastructure as well as habitat improvements. Public access features proposed as a part of these design efforts include, as you can see on the slide here, and it's a little difficult to see, but it's in the pinkish font and slightly over to the right of the site. And the public access features proposed here would include a museum and cultural center, a youth enrichment center, campsites, restrooms, a ranger station, a kayak launch, along with parking facilities and a cafe. The designs showed here is called a soft edge design proposal because it has habitat features along the river's edge. Next slide, please. An alternative proposed design shows similar public access infrastructure along with hardscape and trails close to the river's edge. The infrastructure would be similar. Components such as a museum and youth center would be similar to the previous design, but the layout would be somewhat different. And additional features proposed for the site will include use of flexible spaces, for example, meadows or plazas that may also be used for picnics and events. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed. And in the audience online today on Skype are Christopher Johnson, who's principal engineer with the city, and Brian Powell, who's civil engineer with the City of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Right, is there any board member comments, questions? All right, hearing none. We did receive a speaker card from Christopher Johnson, City of Los Angeles. Christopher.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to give my thanks for this grant provided by your board. We really appreciate it. This grant will provide us a focus for early activation work that provides access to the river's edge, which we expect to begin planning on this summer. Again, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Right, any other public comments? Anybody else wishing, any board members? Okay, so that's our full agenda, Mr. Chair. So I guess I would just like to reach out and ask if there's any other comments on any of the projects at this particular time on the presentation calendar, items 22 through 36. And if not, I will read a motion and then we'll take a roll call vote if you guys are, and if you're all right with that.
Any comments, questions, thoughts by any board members on the slate of agenda items?
Right, so I'll go ahead and read the motion and we'll do a roll call vote. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board adopt the written findings and approve individual projects number 22 through 36, inclusive of the recommended funding sources and amounts as identified in the Wildlife Conservation Board final meeting agenda dated May 20, 2020. Authorize staff to enter into appropriate agreements necessary to accomplish these projects, and authorize staff and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to proceed substantially as planned. Can I have a second?
I'll make a second. Perfect.
Right. All right, Fran. Okay, so we'll do the roll call vote now. So Chuck Bonham.
Yes.
Alina Bokde.
Yes.
Diane Colborn.
Yes.
Mary Kreisman.
Yes.
Fran Pavley.
Yes.
Eric Sklar.
Yes.
Matt Almy.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, that
Hey,
concludes
Chuck.
our.
Chuck, this is Diane. Can I just ask, I think I missed the vote on the consent file earlier. Can you add me to that?
I certainly can. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So that does conclude. I would like to just offer the opportunity for anyone of the board or legislative advisory members to make any comments if they so choose. I know we're a little bit past 1 now, but given the platform that we're currently working in, I just don't want to miss an opportunity for a board member or legislative advisory member to make any comments if they so choose.
Hey, John, let me kick it off and just say a couple things. First, huge kudos to the 80, 90, 120 people who participated. Job well done on the technology platform, everybody. Second, I would just say we collectively, board members, staff, attendees, our stakeholders, have just reaffirmed all the good that is out there. Partnerships and conservation for the benefit of California. So thanks to everyone. Reaffirming the good is probably especially important in these challenging times. And then lastly, I'd say stay safe and healthy, everyone. We'll see you soon.
And I just would like to say thank you for those who've been patient with those of us that maybe aren't quite as technologically savvy as the rest. So appreciate all your efforts and hard work.
And thank you to the staff for just some amazing work. It's so great to keep the work moving in this moment. There's important projects out there, and so glad that we're able to still do the important work of the board and for staff and getting us to do this virtually. It's tough to pivot and figure out new ways to move our work forward, and great job and thank you.
Congrats to our new vice chair.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to echo all the great comments about the hard work of the staff. I mean, these are really wonderful and very inspiring projects. And so it's with all of the transition we've had to kind of go through during this time of moving to virtual meetings and conversations, it really is impressive how well it all has unfolded. So congratulations to the staff and thank you to the board. With that, I must unfortunately actually sign off. But stay safe, everyone, and thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. And I do also want to give a shout out to my staff. They've been unbelievable during this process and just supportive, cooperative, and I just so very much appreciate all of them. So thank you, WCB staff. And so with that, Mr. Chair, you can adjourn the meeting if you would like.
Adjourned.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.